Good afternoon and welcome to the 4 p.m. City Council work session for Tuesday, May 12th. And I have a couple of items that I would ask Council for this work session to, we're going to change around if that's agreeable with Council. First, we have on the agenda to watch a short video called This is Lynchburg. And yes, I'm sorry. And next, if you would allow me, I would like to do a recognition, and because there's someone in the audience here that can accept the recognition, so I would like to take this opportunity to just change the agenda a minute to do the recognition at the front end of the meeting. And also, number one, we have consider revisions to the solid waste ordinance under the work session agenda, but it should actually be moved to the general business. And so we'd like to move it to the 7:30 general business for the presentation then. So is that all right with Council that we move the agenda around like that? All right, thank you. So for the recognition, what I would like to do, let me take this off.
Just a quick question, Madam
Yes.
Mayor.
Yes.
On the moving it, has the advertisements been done?
There was not an advertisement needed today.
Because it was coming back, correct? Sorry, my mic is a little loud. It was coming back, yes. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So this is a proclamation. Last week, there was some discussion by our school system regarding our graduating seniors week. And so if you would indulge me a minute, I'm going to take this off because it's a little hard to read it through it. But I have a proclamation here. And it is for the LCS, Lynchburg City Schools, Graduating Seniors Week. Whereas the Lynchburg City Schools, LCS, class of 2020, has had their senior year interrupted by the coronavirus pandemic. Whereas, although the pandemic has caused hardship and threatened to negatively impact one of the students' most important years, the LCS class of 2020 has continued to show their commitment to their future by completing all the rigorous requirements to obtain their high school diploma. And whereas they have shown pride in their school and surpassed their goals by obtaining college credits, career certifications, and more, and whereas the LCS class of 2020 has participated in or supported extracurricular success in arts and athletics, including regional and state championships, all district and all state honors, and whereas the Lynchburg community is proud of the LCS seniors for their many achievements, and whereas we are thankful to the parents, loved ones, teachers, administrators, coaches, and mentors for their love and support of these young men and women. And whereas, as a show of this community's support, we encourage everyone to display blue and orange ribbons during the week of May 18th through 22nd in support of EC Glass and Heritage High School graduates. Now, therefore, I, Trenae L. Tweedy, Mayor of the City of Lynchburg, Virginia, do hereby proclaim the week of May 18th through 22nd, 2020, Lynchburg City Schools Graduating Senior Week, and congratulate all seniors for their hard work and dedication. May 19th, 2020, Trenae L. Tweedy, Mayor. And I know our superintendent and school board members are here as well, and I'd like to ask Dr. Edwards if she would come up to accept this proclamation. Sterling.
Thank you. I'm sure our students, our families appreciate the support. And all I can say to the community is let's make this place blue and orange next week. Let's celebrate our seniors. Congratulations to my babies, and I'm looking forward to our graduation, although virtually, on May 31st. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, and I'll turn to Ms. Severchek for our short video of This is Lynchburg.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. The Office of Economic Development and Tourism has put together it's I think about a 3-minute video that really paints a really great picture of our city, and I thought it would be a great way to start our meeting this afternoon. It is called This is Lynchburg. be using this video.
Replay.
We'll be using this video to promote our city, both from a sales perspective and a tourism perspective.
Thank you.
With that, we'll move on to the continuation of balancing the FY 2021 operating budget and addressing the proposed budget list. And I would ask if council would first consider the smaller items on the agenda so that we can take care of those and then come back to the two big items, which are funding for the firefighters and schools funding. So if you would turn to page 3 and item number 22. It's Parks and Recreation. Councilmember Higgleson put a couple of these Parks and Recreation items on the list. The first item is an increase in Miller Pool staff pay to help attract and retain staff. Thank you, Councilmember Pero.
And sorry I'm late, by the way. I got locked out and had to vote also.
Oh. Sorry about that.
No, it's no problem.
The press release actually is going out later today announcing that for public health reasons, Miller Park Pool will not be opening this summer, nor will the fountain or the splash pad. If things get better from a public health perspective, the fountain and splash park will be able to be open on pretty short notice. But we don't have funding for any lifeguards or part-time staff at the pool until July 1st. And in the interest, again, of public safety and public health, we're not going to be opening the pool this year.
So what does that mean as far as this? Obviously, we could do away with this funding, as Councilmember Higgleson suggested, but I guess there'd be more. Is this going to be a reduction in the Parks and Recs budget beyond what was already adjusted by staff due to COVID-19?
So my recommendation, and I'm not sure I understand your question, but my recommendation regarding the funding that's on this list for the pool, which are items 22 and item 24, I believe they could come off the list and we could carry forward funding from the current year into fiscal year 2021.
Meaning come off the list being accepted as a deduction to the budget?
Correct. There is an adjustment, I will tell you, there is an adjustment that is needed for lifeguards for the Miller Pool staff. I don't know exactly what that number is, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it.
In this next summer?
In fiscal year 2021.
Okay. How about other dollars associated with the pool? There's the chemical increase, which I think is the next line item, and other pool associated costs. It seems like there should be, instead of, what number is this again, 22? So this was just the increase in the Miller Park pool staff pay. Can we just strike it?
Yes, you can.
Miller Park pool staff pay, which is going to be greater than 6,000. 6,000 is just the increase.
That is just the increase. I'm suggesting that the pay that is in the current year be carried forward to next year.
All right, so there will be
so there will be some funding.
Some funding that will carry them through June.
Correct.
Next year. Okay.
I guess with that, so going from the budget, which is July 1st, so that would be basically, it wouldn't even open till June 1st. And so that's one month. So I think we should, as Councilmember Pero said, I think that would free up a lot of funds because you'll have 11 months of nothing, no chemicals, no, all the water, all the heating and lifeguards and staff and whatnot. Rather than carrying it forward, we have pretty dire things now. I think that would be wise to just say, what's that total? And rather than carrying it forward to be June 1st, which is a little over 12 months from today, to just strike that in totality rather than just the increase.
So, Mr. Eggleston, how about a suggestion that council go ahead and, for the purposes of the list, get this off the list, but ask staff to take a look at what a further reduction would be based on needs, and then they could do that as a staff adjustment.
Thank you both.
We will do that on the next iteration of this on the 26th.
Okay. So I move that we strike, that we accept Councilmember Heggleston's request on item number 22.
Is there a second?
A second. I think there were several of them, weren't there?
Yes, I think you just took care of items number 22 and 24. Item number 23 is the annual maintenance contract for Rec Pro software for program registration fees.
What was it, number 5, though, with that one as well? Is that what you just said, 5?
22 and 24.
22 and 24.
Okay.
Okay, so there's a motion to strike or remove.
To accept.
To accept 22 and 24. And any further discussion on that by either Councilmember Pero or Councilmember Heggleston?
I guess just if you have a ballpark number, what is, because we're going to try to be looking at some other things today, how much that actually frees up. It's obviously, as Councilmember Pero said, frees up more than the 6,000 and, 10, 30,000, or 3,000, 11,000 here.
I'll get you in 1 minute.
So-
Councilman. All right, thank you.
Sorry.
Could you get that back to us, please?
Yes.
And Councilmember Wilder has a question.
How many months is it normally open that you incur
So the
expenses
pool,
anyway?
Jenny, if you wouldn't mind coming up, I believe the pool is open from mid-May to the first week of August.
So it's not like 12 months of expenses?
Correct.
That's what I was trying
It's
to-
less, it's less than.
Right.
That's what I'm trying to figure out. That's
Right.
Memorial, it opens Memorial Day.
Through the first week of August.
All right, I think that answered it.
We'll bring that adjustment back as a staff adjustment.
So if $6,000 was the increase, I think you'd probably say something like $24,000 would be reasonable to assume that maybe something in that neighborhood?
It might, but what,
6,000 was the increase.
that's the increase, but what we can do is, we've asked staff to bring that number
Right.
back to us.
But
so-
as Councilmember Heggleston says, as we're going through and trying to figure out the nuts and bolts, maybe 20, just think $20,000?
I mean,
Maybe
I
it's
would think
than
more
that.
like 200,000.
Oh, no, it's not that.
If you're looking at the increase,
No, not at all.
if the increase was 3%, so 6,000 divided by 3%, which would mean the increase.
It's probably more like a $10 an hour
Well,
to
not
go
the
to
whole,
$15
Let us
an
bring
hour.
back
not just
more
that
precise
one item.
numbers.
Right, staff will
Got it.
bring back the information correctly, just so we'll have the correct information. Ms. Witt and her staff will bring it back
What
to
was the
us.
increased percentage on?
Thank you. All right,
Okay.
any further discussion on that? Are we prepared to vote? I will start with Councilmember Wright.
Aye.
Councilmember Wilder.
Aye.
Councilmember Nelson.
Aye.
Councilmember Pero.
Aye.
Councilmember Heggleston.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dolan. Aye. And I will vote aye as well. Thank you, and that motion passes. Next is number 23, Parks and Recreation, $4,600 for annual maintenance contract for Rec Pro software for program registration fees, et cetera.
And Mayor, members of council, I would make a recommendation that we fund that in the current year out of the city manager's contingency money, where there's about $20,000 left.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Move
Council-
to accept item number 23.
Is there a second? Second. Thank you. The motion has been made and second to accept item 23. Any further discussion? All right, I will call for a vote. Councilmember Wright.
Aye.
Councilmember Wilder.
Aye.
Councilmember Nelson.
Aye.
Councilmember Pero.
Aye.
Councilmember Heggleston. Vice Mayor Dolan. And aye for me as well. Thank you. All right, number 25. Yes. Okay. Number 25, Parks and Recreation, $50,000, furniture and kitchen equipment for Fairview and Yoder Recreation Centers, which is funded with pay-as-you-go. Councilmember,
Just a question. Is
Yes.
this furniture, fixtures, and equipment for the Yoder Center? So the Yoder Center is under renovation now, and this is the FFE that goes with it? Can you say that as opposed to nod, just so that we get? Yeah, okay. Right? Okay.
Yes.
Sorry, I was
Yes.
just seeing some looks. All right, so what the way I understand it is, the center's getting built, it's being constructed, it's being done. Furniture, fish, and equipment is usually a separate purchase from that. So what this means is you have the Yoder Center that's finished, but it doesn't have any furniture and it doesn't have any appliances in it. which makes it an unusable space. So this is pay-as-you-go. It's not reoccurring money. I think we should
Correct.
probably keep it in, but it was a good suggestion to take a look at it. That's just my thoughts.
I know Councilmember Wright, did you have a question? Or I saw your hand.
No, I would move that we remove it from the list and keep it in the budget.
All right, thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, the motion's been made a second. Do you have any further discussion?
I think it's important that we actually put the equipment in these neighborhood centers so they're actually usable. Otherwise, they'll just be empty spaces. So I think it's important that we fund this with one-time money.
All right, thank you. Any further discussion? Councilmember Wilder?
No, I think it's so important, especially now more than ever, we really rely on our community centers. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any further discussion from council members? All right, thank you. I'll call for a vote, starting with Councilmember Wright.
Aye.
Councilmember Wilder.
Aye.
Councilmember Nelson.
Aye.
Councilmember Pero.
Aye.
Councilmember Heckelson.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dolan.
Aye.
And I also. Thank you. Next is number 26, Parks and Recreation, $3,900 for rentals of portable toilets in the park and trail system.
Mayor, members of council, I would suggest that we fund this from one of two places, the city manager's contingency, or, and this is new information that I received this morning around 11 o'clock, the Secretary of Finance for the state has provided to all cities and counties an allocation from the CARES Act for localities. The city's allocation is $7.2 million for COVID-related items. We think we can classify this as a COVID-related eligible expense. We are looking at there are lots of details that come with this money and what is eligible and what is not, but I believe that this is eligible, and if it's not, we can fund it out of the city manager's contingency money.
Thank you. I know I see a lot of fingers now. I know Councilmember Wilders went up first, Councilmember Wright.
You know, one thing we get so many, so many calls in reference to the restrooms for the trails, and especially right now with the COVID situation, the trails are about the only thing we even have that we can go to that's accessible, that we can go to freely. So I think that it's so important to have those porta potties there for our residents.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Wright.
Thank you. 7.2 million, huh?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yes, sir.
That's very interesting. So, and obviously could play a big role in how we structure this budget. I think, when do we think we'll have a good sense of what the requirements are around that?
So the leadership team is going to do a little brainstorming on this tomorrow morning, but I would caution you to think that we could use much or hardly any of that money to help with balancing this budget, as the eligibility to use this money is for one-time expenses, and it cannot be used to replace revenue loss.
All right.
So that is a huge caveat.
That is a big one. I would move that we,
That's a lot of money.
I don't know that we need to decide where the money comes from,
Just take it off.
but just I'd move that we take it off the list.
Right, to accept it.
Sure, to accept it.
All right, is there a second? Thank you. Any further discussion, Councilmember Wright?
No, I think they're really important.
Okay. Councilmember Pero?
No, yeah, the key thing is that there will be porta potties for people to use.
Right.
It's just not gonna be out of this budget. Thanks.
All right, thanks. Councilmember Wilder, I saw, did you have any?
One thing, I just agree, no, nothing else. That's it.
Okay.
But
All
I was
right.
asking the question in reference to the funds. Could those funds be used for since we have to feed our children during the summertime and support of that nature, could that be a condition for the school system to use some of those funds for the feeding program?
So at a quick
Correct.
review of the eligibility, it talked about moving funds between different units of government. I'm not sure, because of the way we are structured, whether the schools are considered a separate unit of government. So that's a I we need to dot and T we need to cross.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Nelson?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Following up on that, Mr. Verchek, is there anything on this list that those funds could be used for? Cut to the chase.
Certainly, I don't believe for the firefighters, that would be ongoing revenue. There are not that many one-time items on this list, so at quick response, I would say
So
the answer is
essentially,
no.
that's a moot point for us at this time.
I believe so.
Thank you.
All right, any further discussion regarding the $3,900 and accepting that? All right, I will, Councilmember Wright, start here. Thank you for the vote. I'm sorry, Councilmember Wilder.
Aye.
Councilmember Nelson.
Aye.
Councilmember Pero.
Aye.
Councilmember Heggelson. Vice Mayor Dolan. Thank you, and I have it here as well. All right, next is community development, $88,194 for one new full-time environmental compliance inspector position in the Zoning and Natural Resources Division, $61,594 salary plus benefits, additional cost associated with the new position of computer, software, phone, and training, $3,600 in a vehicle, $23,000. The cost is 100% funded through the Stormwater Fund.
Yes, ma'am. This is as you said, a new position in the Department of Community Development, but is funded through the Stormwater Fund. And the way that we work together, that workload has increased significantly in the last 5 years, 35%, a 35% increase in the total permits. During our time and the COVID-19 experience, development has not slowed down at all. And we may be slightly less in permits, but the overall value of the size of projects are very similar to last year. So also we know that May is shaping up to be a big month. So we do think this position is pretty critical, as well as understanding that this position has an offsetting revenue. So eliminating the position would not affect your balancing at all.
All right, thank you. Any further discussion on that? Councilmember Heggelson.
You know, with this, I'm reluctant to be looking at new positions. I recognize the work and what needs to be done. I think it would be wise for us to hold off hiring new positions, a new vehicle. I think we have, pretty good sized fleet that hopefully an extra vehicle wouldn't be needed for $23,000 on top of the position. So I still think if we don't relax the position, I think we could certainly relax the vehicle. So the Stormwater Fund is a fee that is paid by our citizens, and it was added a few years ago. You're just now in the process of also adding on to their water bill another $10 solid waste fee. So the stormwater fee on top of now another solid waste fee, I think we need to try to figure out a way that we can take the pressure off and work within our current confines. And if next year this position is still needed, then we could add it. So I'd vote against. I'd recommend we vote against this new position now.
Is there are you making that a motion?
I'll make that as a motion.
Is there a second to the motion? All right, without a second, it does not pass. Councilmember Wilder?
Yes. I'd like to know how important is this particular item, just so I can understand the severity of it. Like, can we wait? Because, water quality and so many other things are so important. I just want to make sure I understand the severity of it and how important it's needed at this time.
Great question. So two things. So first of all, like you said, the environmental impact is tremendously important, and making sure that developers are following the rules and that sort of thing is critical to the environment and in our protection of it. The second thing is from a business perspective, making sure that we are able to get out and inspect appropriately in a timely fashion is really critical to making allowing commerce to continue on. So we want to make sure that we are able to respond to the needs of developers as they're out there. And like I said before, the demand for this position has increased significantly, up 35% in the last several years. So we do think this is critical at this point.
Okay. And second question, by adding it, is it going to adjust if we didn't add it, would it adjust the bill at all, or is it?
No, sir. So
there's fund anyway?
Yeah, there's no recommended adjustment to the stormwater fee.
So it wouldn't be an increase in the taxpayer's water bill because of this position?
That's right.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Any further? Councilmember Nelson, followed by Councilmember Heggelson.
Mr. Wodecker, Dr. Wodecker, excuse me. on the other side of that issue, would there be any reduction in the water bill if we didn't add it? There's not going to be an increase if we do it. Would there be a decrease if we don't do it?
No, I don't, no, I think it would be it's a minimal amount of money that it would not greatly affect it.
All right, any further discussion, questions? Is there a motion? Oh, Councilmember Hagelson, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Now, is this the one, you know, a year or so ago, we had an inspector that was going around various restaurants and various places threatening folks with a $1,000 fine if they pressure wash their parking lot. Is this that same kind of position?
So I'm not aware of that issue necessarily, and certainly would be happy to talk about with you later.
I brought that up, I guess, a few times because lots of the restaurants that when they were pressure washing, I think they even went by our fire stations and said, hey, if you wash a fire truck and it goes into the storm system with suds or not separated, you could be subject to a $1,000 fine for cleaning your restaurant. You know, especially now in a time when we're looking at viruses and cleanliness and cleaning, restaurants like to be clean. And so if that's the kind of the environmental inspector position, I don't know how good that does for, you know, encouraging cleanliness.
I'm sorry, to follow up, could I ask Mr. White to come forward as Community Development Director?
No, this is a different position. This position works on active construction sites. So it's not post-compliance where you're dealing with stormwater runoff from something that's already developed. This is active job sites, grading, that sort of thing.
So, but this is in the stormwater fund, of which you're part of the community development.
Correct.
And the water and the sewer and the stormwater is through a whole different department, right?
That's correct. There are multiple departments that receive stormwater funding to support different aspects. Community development is specifically charged with dealing with the construction activities. So our positions are only construction related.
And so with that too, like for example, some neighborhoods like out in, it's been a while ago now, but it looks like it may be happening again when somebody is cited for a violation. You know, it happened quite a bit out at Greenview Drive area a while back.
Yes, sir.
Lots of citations, but no action. So is this something different that would help with action with regarding citations so it can keep the neighborhood clean and rather than all the dust and things blowing off on them?
That's exactly what this position is for, and we've really just surpassed our limits. We have one person right now who's charged with inspecting all private development sites and coordinating on public sites. They have to be there every 2 weeks, and then within 48 hours of a rain event that produces a quarter-inch of rain. So you can imagine that workload. So that's exactly what we're running into, is trying to make sure that we're more proactive on those efforts.
And last question, is there a way this person could operate without having another new car?
Unfortunately, there's not. Our cars are all allocated out, and obviously this person is inspecting in the field 5 days a week. That's their expectation.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Councilmember Nelson?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would be in favor of this primarily because I, some years ago, had a client who suffered several $100,000 of damage to their property because the city was not able to properly inspect a subdivision being developed upstream from that property. And the very reason for that was there wasn't enough staff, it would rain on a frequent basis, and there were too many sites to be inspected. So I would be in favor of it.
Thank you. Any further discussion, or Councilmember Nelson, would you like to make that a motion?
Yes, I would move that we keep it on the budget.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. The motion's been made and second. Any further discussion? All right. If not, I will call for a vote. Councilmember Wright?
Aye.
Councilmember Wilder?
Aye.
Councilmember Nelson?
Aye.
Councilmember Para?
Aye.
Councilmember Hagelson?
No.
Vice Mayor Dolan? Aye. And I have it, so the motion passes. Thank you.
Mayor, before we move on to the next item, I neglected wanted to share with you that on page 1, in my anxiousness to get to page 3, to point out that we have a staff adjustment of $95,000, a decrease due to a relook at what our fuel costs will be. Fuel, as you may have noticed at the pump, has been going down. So the impact to the general fund is $95,000, so that contributes to the bottom line.
Okay, thank you. Okay, yeah, number 2, correct, under staff adjustments?
Yes.
Yes, okay, thank you very much.
Now we're back to number 28.
Yes. All right, thank you for that. Number 28, community development, $7,000 estimated cost of hiring a monitoring service to implement the short-term rental registration program. And is that?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Reed.
So we have an existing year-to-year contractual relationship with a monitoring company that is assisting us with short-term rentals. The additional funds that you see there are related to any fluctuations that we might see on short-term rentals, and so we pay by the listings that are in Lynchburg. We were anticipating growth in that market. We recognize that market may have changed, and the environment may have changed for that. So, you know, if that were an area that we felt like we could remove, that would not be ideal, but would certainly not greatly affect us.
All right, thank you. And that was brought, yes, by Councilmember Hagelson.
And so with the delay in this program too, I think we just got a announcement or something today on the registration that's delayed or something. I didn't get the chance to read it since it just came, but okay. So take this 7,000 and then I guess put it as freed up money then?
To accept it.
Yeah, to accept it. There we go.
Thank you.
I'll make
Is that
that
a motion?
Second.
All right, thank you. The motion has been made. Any further discussion? Councilmember Hagelson or Pero? All right, thank you. Any further discussion by other council members? All right. Yes, to accept this as a removal of the funds and to be put into a line item for use, the $7,000.
It falls to fund.
It falls to fund balance, yes.
I'm sorry, I have to confess, I zoned out
Okay.
during some of the questions. How essential is this? Sorry.
Well, okay, so
I'm so sorry.
this is,
forgive me.
so we have a contractual relationship with this company that does monitoring for short-term rentals for us. So these funds, so we have that existing relationship. So these funds were intended as we believe the market would continue to grow and we pay this company by the parcel or by the property. Obviously, we recognize that the environment has changed. So I think, you know, we would prefer to have that there because I don't know that this is going to last forever, but we recognize that the environment has changed.
Yeah. I will, I'd like to keep it in the event that we do find that it is necessary, so I will not be voting in favor of the motion.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Wilder?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Nelson?
Aye.
Councilmember Pero?
Aye.
Councilmember Helgelson? Vice Mayor Dolan? Aye. And I will vote aye on that. Thank you. All right. Next is number 29, Economic Development and Tourism, $250,000. Yes.
I asked this to go on the list because I knew we were going to need to make significant changes to the budget. And talking with the business community after that, you all have seen a number of emails from the business community. This is you know, an indication of how important it is, especially now that you know, since we took this off the budget, we've seen how important it is to restart our economy and get it going again. I think this money is critical. I asked to put it on the list. If there's no objection from the council, we can just take it off the list.
All right.
I have some questions still on this.
Okay, well, we
It may
can,
not be this one, it may be, I couldn't follow exactly where all the money went, but.
All right, we accept that be left on the budget? Is that okay?
well, here, I'll go ahead and I'll just make a motion. If Councilmember Helgelson has some questions, we can ask some questions.
Thank you.
I move that we strike this from the list.
All right, the motion has been made and second. Councilmember Pero, any further discussion?
And not other than of what I've already said. This is important for the business community. We heard from many of them. I heard from them specifically and directly. Economic development plays a key role in the recovery of our economy, and it's important to leave the money in. Plus, I understand it's a transfer that it's just basically a bookkeeping of something that has happened or has been that way in the past. Okay.
Yes, thank you, Councilmember Wright.
I agree. I think it's critically important. The return on investment for this money is tremendous, as is the work of the economic development team. It builds a lot of goodwill with the business community. Certainly, a number of partnerships have prospered because of these funds, and I think now with coronavirus, it's more important than ever that we support these kinds of these initiatives. So I'm very much in favor of keeping the 250.
All right, thank you. Further discussion? Councilmember Helgeson.
And maybe this would be, I guess this would be probably more Jet. I got a few questions for you. I guess the first is, I was reading recently about a study of Amherst County where they want a $500,000 or a $500,000 study, and they want the city to pitch in about $30,000 for it, to do a study of some property in Amherst. Can you help me? I realize there's lots of money, different places, and I appreciate your spreadsheet too, which I'd like to get to where that money's coming from or going. It may not be this 250, but I recognize it's in the whole department. So help me understand how Lynchburg.
So this was for the Central Virginia Training Center, and so the Lynchburg Regional Business Alliance stepped up to do a master plan for that property. That property will come on the rolls, and Christine's here today that can provide if I don't articulate this exactly, but the state owns that property, and they are going to release the property or have the property, decide what happens with the property. And so Lynchburg Regional Business Alliance, along with the Central Virginia Planning District, has come out to really try to say we need that parcel to be master planned, to figure out what could go there. We don't want the parcel to be left, on the banks of the James River and right across from our downtown, to be left and not have anything happen with it. It's got a very large, it's a very large brownfield, meaning the property over there is very, very old, and there's a lot of remediation that needs to be done. But one of the only ways politically to get the state to pay attention is to try to move forward and look at how that property could be repurposed. So the Lynchburg Regional Business Alliance applied to Go Virginia for grant funds. They also have worked with the town of Amherst, the county of Amherst. They came to the EDA and asked if they would participate in a master plan and what the EDA voted on was they said that they would participate, but it would be after the Lynchburg Regional Business Alliance had raised all the funds that they needed for that. So it's a $500,000 master plan because it's over 300 acres.
So a $500,000 plan in Amherst County.
Right.
And Lynchburg is, and I think it was somewhat of a controversial vote, but 30,000. So where does that 30,000? Where does that come from?
That 30,000 would come from the Economic Development Authority.
Okay. So those kind of things, we're elected by Lynchburg and to represent Lynchburg taxpayers. So when I hear and see those kind of things, I recognize there's lots of different pots of money. Seeing a $500,000 study, I'm sure they have need for it up there for that land in Amherst County. We have lots of land and lots of things in the city of Lynchburg, especially now with this crisis and this economic crisis that I think we're fixating on. Right. So I can appreciate what they're doing over there, but for us to step up to the plate when we have lots of other things, it's a little troubling to me. Secondly, I saw this list, and I'm sure there's that you emailed us, and I'm glad I asked for it. I had no idea. that there was hundreds of thousands of dollars given to private organizations. I'm sure there's lots of purposes why we give, money to ODAC and, the meeting planners, 10,000 to a meeting planner conference. But when we look at times of austerity, when we look at times of trying to figure out how we can pay our school teachers a better raise, or how we can make sure we have, a new medic unit, seeing 362,000 or 4,000 last year, another 60,000 for contributions going to the Lynchburg City Schools Education Foundation, going to the academy yet again in spite of all that we funded. Normally when council would get votes like this, we have to vote on it having actually a super majority, where we have to actually go over and above just a simple majority. How do these monies get allocated?
The tourism dollars are all within the tourism budget for the Office of Economic Development and Tourism, and so these are sponsorships to bring events to the city. Everything that we do, we are really trying to get a return on investment to increase revenue for the city. So some of these folks are nonprofits, but we are getting a return on service in terms of advertising, in terms of heads and beds, in terms of tournaments coming here. And in many cases, if you're talking about our colleges, there are rules and regulations that don't allow them to sponsor or do those kinds of things. So all of this, what you see on the city side of it, is all part of the tourism, the tourism budget, and that budget is the budget you vote on for the city, for our department.
Yeah, and we don't ever see it to this detail. And and I can understand to bring in tourism, but when we spend $10,000 for an event and you have 100 people that maybe go to a hotel, I recognize the economic impact, but the return on the investment of the tax dollars going out, 10,000 versus, I don't think we're getting $10,000 of tax dollars in. I recognize, I saw your numbers here on economic impact. Those are for other people. This comes from, city taxpayers, and especially with that tourism fund.
And also on all of these events that we have here, we do have a tool that runs an economic impact calculator on the events to make sure that the event is either growing or is something that is bringing tax dollars into the city. So it's not just lodging, it's what we're experiencing right now, which is the loss of, millions of dollars during this unprecedented event, is sales, meals, lodging, amusement tax. And so our tourism efforts are different than most, and I'm really grateful for that at this particular time, because it's based on, and I know there's some uncertainty there, but it's based on our colleges and universities and what they drive and bring into the city, as well as our business community. So our tourists are the people that come, and I'm really hopeful that sports will come back, and that the sporting side of it, especially with Liberty, has just been unbelievable.
And they're doing it, so right. I mean, they're doing their own marketing.
Yeah, they do their marketing, but we partner. I mean, we partner very, very. I mean, I think you could talk to the whole athletic staff over at Liberty. We partner side by side with them on many, many, many of these type of events. As I told you all the last time that I came to talk about it, we had put in bids for some national collegiate lacrosse, golf, things going all the way out to 2026. I know the world might look a little different, but we are very hopeful that we will still be able to solidify those contracts.
And lots of these items on this list I can appreciate. I mean, I appreciate the D-Day Memorial, but when we spend $5,000 as a donation to the D-Day Memorial, which is a fabulous thing,
yes,
to see that we're actually getting that back in actual, revenue. There's lots of wonderful things here, but it's a matter of saying, especially in times like this, I just,
yes, sir.
I think that's a little, that's a lot of stuff on there. One other item, which I didn't see on the budget, and I'm not sure where it is, I guess it's not in this 250, maybe it is, but the 101,675 that's going from the economic development to the Alliance.
Yes,
I know
that's in our regular budget.
We've had that before as a separate item. I didn't see it in our normal budget, so it's apparently, it's moved into somewhere. I didn't see it, so I didn't think we're contributing any more to it.
No, we absolutely are, and we administratively moved that into the Office of Economic Development because they were processing the bill, and it is economic development. And the partnership between the city's Office of Economic Development and Tourism and the Lynchburg Regional Business Alliance is getting, frankly, much stronger, and the intersection and working together is critical to economic development for our city and for our region.
And I can appreciate them working together. You know, I was historically, you know, chambers and city government kind of butt heads a lot, you know, because one's for more regulation and one's for, you know, free enterprise. And I was surprised to see that there hasn't been as much headbutting. And now I, you know, when contributions to organizations are made, you know, you kind of really, you really wonder. So seeing this extra funds going to all these organizations, I'm sure they're wonderful things, but in times of austerity, when we're looking at how do we fund a police department, and how do we fund an extra medic unit, and how do we pay our teachers, and, you know, you kind of really question. So now this 250, where is that going from now? So none of this comes from the 250? All these items that I just mentioned?
No.
So the 250, what does that actually do?
That is, well, it's called General Development Support, and back in 2014, there was an incentive in code that went along with the Enterprise Zone. The Enterprise Zone is a state-funded program, but you had to have a local piece to it. So back in the day, that was put in code, and Mitch would process anybody that qualified for that, and he would process a reimbursement for that. DHCD came to us in 2014 and asked us to remove it from code, but we had to replace it with something. So we replaced it with the local redevelopment grant, which makes up the majority of the 250.
So what do you do? So the 250 doesn't go to these, you know, to the Alliance or those, the other things that we talked about. So what does that actually go to do? How does it spur the economy?
It spurs the economy because that local redevelopment grant is something where it's a capital investment into property here, and then they receive, if they meet the requirements, they receive a grant from us for investing in that property.
Like to build or to?
Yes, if they improve the property.
Okay.
If they improve the property, then that local redevelopment grant is available to them for the improvement of the property. But just like when I put on the report that I sent to you all previously, we get a return on investment for all of that, meaning a citizen or a commercial person has invested in their building, and then they receive a grant for that improvement of a property.
Is it bid upon? I mean, is it?
It's an application process,
so the best
and they
one
have
gets
to.
it, or?
Well, no, they just all submit, and then we prorate it based on how many applications we receive.
So the 250 is designed for somebody to either put a business in Lynchburg or expand a business in Lynchburg?
Well, and it's for the improvement of actual physical property that they own, right? So they own property or they rent property, and they're going to improve that property. Then that is what those grant funds are used for. And it really is there to replace the other incentive that we took out in 2014. And actually, because we can cap what this grant program does, the other program that was in code was written way back in the day and was such that one person could get more than the 250 based on their tax revenue.
So this one here, the 250, sounds like it's probably, you know, the other ones, I guess, is what I question by that's not on the list, but have you curtailed any of your tourism budget this year because of the fact that we have, people can't really travel?
Absolutely, we have.
We didn't see it on the list or anything.
We've got the fund, well, it's all part of our it's part of our whole budget.
But we didn't see a staff adjustment on that?
We have not made any adjustments to the economic development and tourism budget in our recommendations.
Even with the new, the post-COVID one?
Yeah, and I think it's important to remember that once all of this, ends, right, in a safe and responsible way, we've got to get the economy going back. We got to keep booking meetings here. We've got to keep putting heads in beds, and those are the things that pay for that medic unit, the schools, and those sort of things. So we've got to continue to invest in that.
And we do, but if you have hundreds of thousands of dollars that's not being spent on advertising now, that wouldn't be helpful to then spend $400,000 of advertising later to really advertise when, you obviously would want to continue that same pattern, which means that some of that would be offset to be able to be utilized differently.
We have certainly looked at everything, and we're talking about the 2020 budget now, but we've looked at everything that we're doing. We put the freeze on that the city manager told us as far as obviously any travel, any training, any of that, and we're looking very carefully at any advertising we do. But this industry, this sector of our economy has been decimated. And we have got, I will tell you that when President Falwell said that he was rescheduling graduation for September 11th, that was an unbelievable day and a shot in the arm for a lot of our hotels and people here to say it will come back. And so it's things like that. We are currently meeting with Liberty right now to look at, and I know that I will say it wrong, ASUN. Yes, is that right? Correct. The ASUN conference to have all that back. So we are really trying to be very careful with the funds that we have, but we are also out there to say that we will please postpone your event, don't cancel it, and that we will be open for business safely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Wilder had a thought, and then Councilmember Pero. Thank you.
I'm just trying to make sure I understand everything as well. So with the Economic Development Authority, is that a group of members that are appointed by you, or? So they're appointed by City Council. Are these business leaders?
Yes, the chairs.
So they're business leaders in our community? So have they been reviewing the item that you suggested and making recommendations by the board that we've appointed to assist you?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. I just want to make sure we're clear on all that. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Councilmember Pero.
Just a quick thought. A couple years ago, there was the Opportunity Lynchburg video that I love so much, and we saw that, I guess, in the fall at some point. I walked in at the end of this one going off. I hadn't had a chance to see that before, and I don't know what set that up. Sorry, I was a little bit late. But the thought is, can we go ahead, assuming there's going to be a football season, that I think that one of our audiences would be Liberty University, and to have that going, at a break during a football game.
Absolutely.
Because that's a great out-of-town audience that it seems targeted to. Primarily out-of-town audience.
Absolutely. We just wanted you all to be able to see the video. I just think it reminds you of why you do what you do. And I understand that you have really challenging decisions to make, and I really appreciate that. But that video I think it captures the city, and I really am pleased that it was done by a local person that worked with us to complete that. We had it on the website for National Travel and Tourism Week, as well as National Economic Development Week, as well as National Small Business Week. And we hope that that's a shot in the arm to all of our citizens to say we will get through this, as well as to tell people that we will reopen safely and successfully.
Right.
Thank you.
Well, I think it's a very nice video. I think getting in front on the scoreboard would be really cool, and an appropriate use of tourism dollars. And it's a shame we didn't have that for our manager search profile.
Correct.
That would have been a nice display at Lynchburg.
Would have been.
Anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we have a motion on the floor, and if there's no further discussion.
I guess just one quick, on this item, I will support, but I do hope that we can really, and I realize it's not now, but I hope that they will be looking at all these other items. I mean, there's lots of things that it's a little disconcerting, so, but I'll support this one. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Wright. I'm calling for the
Yeah,
vote.
yeah,
Thank
yeah.
you.
Aye, definitely.
All right, Councilmember Wilder.
Aye, and can I make a
Oh, go right ahead.
Aye. And I just want to thank Ms. Upshur for the work she's doing in our community. I go to several different boards and several different committee meetings, and when Marjette comes in, the room stands up because she has such a great relationship with our business community, and they really appreciate her. And she has so much energy that they respect her leadership. So I just want to tell you and your staff members, thank you. We appreciate the work you're doing for our community to make Lynchburg the place that it is. Thank you so much for your help.
Thank you. Councilmember Nelson.
Aye.
Councilmember Pero.
Aye, and I want to, Chair Strohschneider is here from the EDA, and I'm sure he got Mr. Helgeson's message loud and clear.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Helgeson.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dolan. Aye. And aye. So the motion passes 7-0. Thank you. Next is external service providers, which is $12,167 for Virginia Legal Aid Society. Discussion around that.
Just at this time, I think we talked about this a few years ago, when they sued the city. So it's now a time that we're in austerity, funding an outside organization. I don't think that is prudent. So, and it does require, it's a charitable contribution that requires a supermajority, so I think we should cut the funding.
I second that.
Motion has been made and second. Further discussion regarding this?
I have something to add, Madam Mayor, if Mr. Helgeson doesn't. In thinking about this, I understand what they're trying to do. I understand their work. I'm still not pleased with with some of the decisions that they've made. And I will tell you, they are running the Housing Authority ragged right now. We have probably spent close to $50,000 in legal fees at the Housing Authority for frivolous suits that are being brought up. One case, without getting into specifics, we had, I believe it was an employee of the Housing Authority that that allowed an acquaintance of theirs to jump the list in public housing under false pretenses, and we couldn't get the person out of the house, and they're still going through a process, and legal aid is defending them tooth and nail for a person that basically perjured themselves to get there. So stuff like that is just not fair. It's not right. Everybody is entitled to equal protection under the law. I get that, but it's over the top in this case. Plus, court's been closed for the past couple months. They can carry over their dollars they can carry over their dollars to next year. I'm sure they qualified for federal funding, so that money can supplant the money that we're giving here. Strike it.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Nelson, followed by Councilmember Wright.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As some of you probably have heard, I've been a pro bono attorney contributing my legal services to the indigent poor for over 44 years in the city of Lynchburg. I'm very much aware of the services of Virginia Legal Aid. It was started the year before I opened my practice in right around 1976. There's no question that the small staff and few attorneys in the legal aid office cannot handle all of the cases that there is a need for. The primary function for legal aid to this community is to serve as a clearinghouse to determine the indigent eligibility of persons who have a grievance, and that grievance is reviewed by the staff of legal aid, and likewise the financial qualifications of the applicant are reviewed, and then those clients are referred to private attorneys in the city who accept cases that are within their field of practice. And as I said, I've done this for 44 years. Most private attorneys cannot afford to have a staff member who processes indigent qualifications, so it is a great benefit to those in this community who have legal needs that need to be addressed to have an office to which all can go and then be farmed out to the attorneys who can serve the interest. I think Councilmember Pero makes a good point, that at this time the courts have been closed. Only those cases involving serious criminal crimes are being heard because they involve speedy trial issues. But at some point, all of those persons who are now unemployed, suffering financial distress, being forced into accepting loans at usurious rates, once the courts come open again, there's going to be a wave of legal needs among those in our community. And that is not a good time, in my opinion, to be cutting the clearinghouse facilities that legal aid will provide to those, so as to be able to get in the courts and redress their grievances. There's no question that there are those who abuse the legal system, those who take advantage of the city. It has been that way since I've been practicing law, and it's going to be that way long after I'm 6 feet under. But that is not a basis to deny justice and allow our good courts and our good attorneys to provide the needs of our citizens. And this is a very paltry amount of money in exchange for those benefits. I also want to say there's no question there was a case a couple of years ago that was directed against the city. It caused the city to incur substantial legal fees. And the merits of the case were extremely dubious, in my opinion. I have worked with the city attorney and with the attorneys at Legal Aid to try to resolve the communications and the protocols and the procedures so that that type of situation is not repeated. To the best of my knowledge, it seems to be in place and working very well, although we haven't had any cases. And it may be because of the procedure we haven't had any cases where it has to be tested. But I would be in favor of this and would vote against eliminating $12,000, $167 to legal aid.
Thank you, Councilmember Nelson. Councilmember Wright?
Madam Mayor, I think Councilmember Wilder had his hand up before me.
Oh, I'm sorry, Councilmember Wilder.
Just so I can understand as well, that $12,000, what service are they providing for the city? Is it just general support for them, or is it for a particular item?
It's general support.
Just general support. Okay, right, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Wright.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I mean, the Virginia Legal Aid Society does incredibly, as has been outlined, incredibly important work for some of the most vulnerable members of our community. And it helps to sort of even the scales of justice for those who can't afford a lawyer in civil matters. I'm not surprised that some folks on the dais would want to strike this funding, but I think this is a really important partnership for the city. It's important for the people in our community who struggle day in and day out. And it's a relatively, given our budget, a small amount of money, but it does a world of good. So I will enthusiastically be voting against this motion.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Dolan.
Yeah, I also would support leaving this money in here. I think, you know, when the dust settles after COVID, I think there are going to be a great number of people needing this service more than ever. And I also realize that people abuse, but I don't think that we should make other people suffer for a few people that are not behaving properly. So.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Wilder.
I agree with the points from Councilman Perro. So I wish in those kind of issues, I wish we could look into those things and continue to express our concerns with legal aid about issues that make it challenging. The way Councilman Nelson spoke to them about the other issue that we had some time ago, if we can make sure that they're aware of these kind of issues and how challenging they are. I'm not trying to tell them what to do, but they need to understand certain issues that are challenging for a person who might be trying to take advantage of the system that may be hurting others. So if there's some kind of a mechanism that we can have in place, that we could communicate with them, or if he has to come to dialogue with legal aid or some sort like we had in the past, they can understand our position in certain areas that makes it somewhat challenging to do business kind of thing. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Wilder. Councilmember Helgeson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. You know, and you know, piggybacking off of what Councilmember Wilder said, normally when you hire an attorney or you pay money to an attorney, your attorney sues somebody else. It's rare that you pay somebody with tax dollars $12,000 and then they sue you. That's the problem.
Thank you, Councilmember Para.
Just a quick point. I'm not, my frustration with legal aid is not with the clients that legal aid has, but it's they're accepting some of these cases and pursuing, in this case specifically, the housing authority. I believe that their tactic is you drag it out as long as it can until it becomes untenable or unsustainable for the housing authority to continue pursuing cases where, frankly, some people need to be out of the public housing because, well, they're barricaded inside and shooting the place up. That person needs to leave, obviously. Other instances like this where people have broken the law to be able to be there. And I just wish they weren't taking those cases. And that's the message that I wish to send by my vote today.
Thank you. And so if there's no further discussion, then I will call for the vote. And Councilmember Wright?
No.
Councilmember Wilder?
No.
Councilmember Nelson?
No.
Councilmember Pero?
Aye.
Councilmember Helgeson?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dolan? No. And no for my vote as well. Thank you. Councilmember Pero?
This will be in the budget as a separate line item and will require a supermajority at that time to approve. So I was just kind of thinking through how that works. All right, thanks.
Yes, thank you. Next is number 31. It's non-departmental. There's $0 applied to that now, and it's the Poverty Initiative. And Councilmember Wright asked that that be put on the list.
Madam Mayor, I'm just sort of curious to ask the city manager when she's free. Sorry, no worries. No worries. I felt awkward.
Update on how much money was left in this account.
No, understood. Sorry about that. So your original budget proposed reducing this to $0. You know, previous years had been $25,000, $50,000. Can you help me understand what the logic was behind that proposed cut?
Yeah, absolutely. When the budget team and I were getting down to balancing the budget, and there was still some money left in this account. I'm not exactly sure how much because funds have been allocated but not spent. There was a choice of funding College Hill Neighborhood Center or funding the Poverty Initiative, and I chose to put the money towards College Hill Neighborhood Center.
Okay. So I know you were just talking about how much is in the fund balance. Do we know how much is remaining?
Okay.
It's probably somewhere in the $20,000 to $30,000 range.
Well, there's $126,000, but there was a council report that we're looking for that allocated a lot of that to the various groups.
Right.
I believe they have to spend it. It's a reimbursement type thing. So I'm trying to figure out how much you allocated, but it seemed in the back of my head it was about $100,000.
Yeah, I recall a little over $100,000. So let's say there's not much, because I think it was starting from like $140,000 or so. So there's $20,000 to $30,000 perhaps remaining in the initiative. Have we gotten feedback from the Bridges to Progress Steering Committee on what this would mean for their initiative? I know that we have some steering committee members here, so I'm curious if they want to chime in, but have we gotten any sort of formal feedback?
I would have to defer to the committee members.
Okay. I just want to pause my questions then and ask council members.
I would say no. That would be my answer. And considering of getting the feedback, yeah. You know, I think that this is, I'm just going to, well, I'll defer also to Vice Mayor Dolan. Did you have any comments?
No, my only comment is because they're not able to meet, they're not able to get out and do what they need to do with the dollars. Right. They're not going to be able even to meet that 12-month period that we have set up. So it's like everything else. We just don't know how
it will affect.
Shake out.
And I had a question too, because of just thinking of the announcement that the city manager made today. I just personally believe we're going to have people who will need employment services and different types of things related to the pandemic and COVID. So can any of those funds that we actually potentially are bringing in of the 7.2, can they be utilized for something like employment services and that sort of thing related to?
So I am not sure about that. Again, we just got this information a couple hours ago, and I've
Right.
not been able to read through all of it. But I will say that the applications for the $420,000 in the additional community development block grant were due yesterday. And a number of our nonprofits, well, let me just say a handful of our nonprofits have asked for funding to help folks with utility payments and those kinds of things. So frankly, I think that that is a great injection into helping people that are challenged with poverty, particularly now in these COVID-19 times.
Can I ask as a member, Vice Mayor as well, are you all concerned about if this was zeroed out? I mean, is this going to?
I am very concerned about it. I realize why the city manager and them did that, but I'm very concerned, particularly now during this period where we're in with, we know unemployment rates are higher. We don't know what employment's going to look like even for businesses that reopen, especially for our service industry. And so while we have employment workforce-related committees in here, that also affects other areas of our city regarding the poverty issue. So I'm concerned about it. That's why I'm asking, is there an opportunity? And I would say no, they've not been able, as the Vice Mayor said, I will echo, to give their feedback because of the COVID halting and the work being halted as well.
Can I make a suggestion then that we hold on addressing this item until after we have sorted through the other, I mean, really big items that I think will largely decide how much money we have remaining at the end of the year, and then if there is some funds that we could potentially either, well, first off, it'll give us time to clarify what can be done with the federal COVID-related relief funds, and then otherwise, if we have a fund balance, we can probably consider perhaps moving some to the initiative. So I would, I don't know if that needs to be a motion or if I can just ask for consensus from council that we hold on addressing this until after we've discussed some of the bigger items.
All right, any further? Councilmember Heckelson?
I'd just like to address this a little bit. You know, it's interesting. I think the best thing that we can do to fight poverty is have a gag order on our governor. You understand the three things that I've always said that what you do to get out of poverty. It's been by every study known to man. You work 40 hours a week. You finish high school, and you don't have children until you're married. With this order that he's done, he's forced us to not work. People that are wanting to work, he's forced businesses to shut. We have a school system that's wanting to teach the children. Close that. And now people are at home, and so with nothing to do, so we are having more children. So the very three things that are counterproductive to fighting poverty, how you get people out of poverty, are what's being incentivized through these forcing of and closure of our economy in Virginia. So if we can utilize some type of stopping any of this, that would be the only way I would look at funding more poverty reduction, because that's creating it.
All right, any further discussion? Is council in agreement to put this on hold until we come back with more information? All right, thank you. That is what we will do. So I'll ask staff to put that to the side for the moment. Number 32. Let me see. Do you want to, that's
Mayor, I would suggest that you move down to items 33 and 34 and then come back to item 32.
right, that's what I was going to say. That's a bigger item. 33, external service providers, $40,685. Virginia Cooperative Extension Service, $44,000. Submitted request, manager's proposed budget, kept funding flat with adopted fiscal year 2020. Councilmember Wright asked that $2,000 for office support services be included, and $1,390 for potential staff raises in 2020 salary plus benefits, which is a total $3,390, not proposed for funding in fiscal year 2021. All right, Councilmember Wright.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So just to be clear here, the proposal, or what I would recommend to council, is that we approve $2,000 for office support services for Virginia Cooperative Extension. They have requested this sum of money now for several years, and have found it, according to their executive director, their local agent, incredibly hard to do their work. And they're doing really significant and I think important work in our community, especially right now during coronavirus. It's a small amount of money. They are emphatic that it would do a lot of good for their team, and their return on investment is impressive. For every dollar that they receive, they generate almost $20, a little over, I think, about $19.88 in local economic impact. So it's a significant return for a small amount of money. And so, given that our fund balance is currently $179,935 and $2,000 is a pretty small amount of money, and not going to make a big difference to our bottom line, but it will make a big difference for Virginia Cooperative Extension. I would like to make the motion that we approve an additional $2,000 to their request.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I second.
Motion has been second. Is further discussion? Councilmember Wright?
No, ma'am.
Vice Mayor Dolan?
I think he outlined very carefully.
All right, thank you. Any further discussion?
I think he's outlined very carefully what the reason and rationale is behind the need. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Wilder?
Just so I'm clear, the amount we were talking about is the $2,000 additional amount, correct? So could that amount come from the manager's budget, contingency budget, or since it's a small amount?
Yeah.
So could we do that and just take it off the list?
That would be one-time money. This would be
ongoing.
Okay.
Well, I mean, true. We don't know what their office needs will be next year. We could authorize it for one time, and if they find it's not that valuable.
Okay.
Got a feeling they're not going to just give it
I
back
doubt it
next
too,
year.
but
I
you
mean,
know, it's worth saying.
understand
Who knows?
how
Stranger things have
How
happened.
budgets work.
Yeah.
Like, oh, yeah, we had no use for it. Just take it.
I know. I'd be
right.
surprised too.
All right, Councilmember Para?
Thank you. And, well, that gets into reoccurring dollars, reoccurring expenses with reoccurring revenues policy. So I don't think we should do this. Nobody else in the city is getting a raise. I don't.
Office supplies.
Office supplies and potential staff raises.
No, he just said the 2,000.
I just said the 2,000, not the 1,300.
Okay. Sorry, I was looking at the whole 39.3. So office supplies, they really need $2,000 worth of office supplies from the city?
It's not supplies. They have said it's for office support services, so especially like things like postage. They do a lot of work with labs around the state, including at Virginia Tech, and this would make it a lot easier for them to do their work.
I think he probably didn't get as much money as he wanted from the state. I think they do good work, but the city can't help prop up everybody. We're already propping up a bunch of external services providers. Here's another one. We've been asked to prop up the schools tremendously. We just can't support everybody. So no.
Councilmember Helgelson?
And Madam Mayor, I appreciate what they do. I mean, the cooperative extension, they do good things. They have lots of volunteers with master gardeners and whatnot. They look at plants to see why they're sick. But the city manager and staff recommended this probably not to increase. Obviously, the raise needs to be removed, which it looks like it is, but having extra postage in a time, you know, I know they do soil samples and they do limbs that they cut off to see why a tree died and whatnot, but you know, I think we're funding them pretty well already. They are an organization that's coupled with Virginia Tech, so they do have lots of internal funding. They do a good thing. Most of our departments that would like to have more funds are not getting it. And so before we give to others, I think we need to take care of our own. So I'll be voting against this.
Thank you. Councilmember Wright? You had something.
Sorry, I just wanted to I mean, I don't know, there are very few returns on an investment where, you know, for every dollar you get $20 back. I mean, that's a pretty amazing return, and I just, it boggles my mind that we wouldn't want to do that.
So if we spend $2,000 more, we get more back?
In
Or you get the
economic
same
impact.
thing?
Local economic impact is $20.
Can I just add a little bit to that
So
conversation?
if that, so maybe we should give more then, and then we can solve our budget crisis. You know, I recognize lots of these multipliers, and I recognize and heard them for a lot of years. The reality of it is we have a budget challenge right now. Would be great if we could get back more money later. So I think we got to look at real dollars right now. Sorry, Madam Mayor.
Oh, no, that's fine. I just wanted to, I know you were talking about what they do, and I just know that in the past couple of years, I have learned, just for the viewing public and maybe for this conversation, that they do certifications, they do workforce development. I know that they were going to be working with our employment Youth Futures program, Virginia Career Works workforce program. So I just wanted to give an overview, a bigger overview, I guess, of what the extension does, because I learned that just through my personal experiences with careers and stuff, but they have a lot of things that they work with within the community beyond just the trees and the impact of gardening and that sort of thing. I think I just wanted to clarify that so people would understand their full breadth of what they do. So where are we on the motion has been made? Is there any further discussion? And is that something it's the one time that we're talking about, we're going to take the vote up, but was there any information or anything requested back from this? Okay, thank you. So I will call for the vote. Councilmember Wright? Councilmember Wilder? No. Councilmember Nelson? No. Councilmember Pero?
No.
Councilmember Helgeson?
No.
Vice Mayor Dolan? Aye. And no here. All right. Yep. And that number has not moved much, if council members are looking at it. All right. Thank you.
It's moving. That's good.
Yeah, a little bit. All right. Next is council manager offices, $72,852. Training and conference. Councilmember Helgeson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. You know, with this, you know, as we look at the budget, and we got this, I think, really a little bit later than we normally get it, which the detail of the training and whatnot, I think we should maybe make a little bit of changes on here. For city council, the training and conferences, I think, actually can be justified because of the fact that we're, you know, kind of volunteers, we're citizen representatives. You go to conferences, you have training, you kind of get some ideas, you do other things. Totally get that. Where I do have problem is with, you know, the highest paid professional staff that we have are going to training and conferences. You know, you hire somebody who's an expert based on expertise, and when I started looking at this list, and again, you know, it's in time of austerity, going to conferences, $7,500 for a ICMA, a winter conference for the VLGMA for another $2,200, going to a summer conference for $3,500, going to a VML conference for $900, leadership development for $6,700. With those things, it's twofold impact. So it's the impact of what happens with the actual dollars going out, which I think we're now in a time that we've got to realize, hey, let's conserve these dollars going out on frivolous, unnecessary training for experts. But the bigger issue is our people are gone. You know, I've over the last few years, we've noticed, and, you know, well, we're all gone because of X, Y, and Z. This will be the fill-in. This is this. And so these conferences are a twofold impact. They're the money going out to go for the conference, and secondly, the lost opportunity of somebody there actually manning and running the ship. So I think these items should be easy to be struck. That's the $22,850. The clerk of council money, $5,300. I realize that's you know, a fairly newer position. Maybe we should keep some of that in there for a conference. But the city manager, deputy city manager, assistant city manager for $22,850, that needs to be struck. The dues and memberships, another $5,925 for somebody's membership in an organization. you know, I'm in members of an organization. Lots of folks are, and we typically pay that ourselves. I mean, we're paying pretty good salaries here to be able to pay your own dues if desired. So I think the dues could be easily removed. You know, and then the question comes about of this first cities, or what is that? I guess we got rid of the VML last year, and this $22,900 is membership fees for Virginia First Cities. Councilmember Perro, maybe you can help us with that one. Is that, do you think that's, I know you've been active with them and on the board, do you think that's, in this time, is that a?
Yeah, I am a member of the board, so I see the budget and vote on the budget, so
Yeah.
don't put me in too hard of a spot here, Mr.
Yeah,
Edelson, please.
nope,
But I thank you for asking, because I wanted to bring this up. Virginia First Cities has done really terrific work lobbying for us on our behalf. Just recently, I was invited to be on a conference call with the Deputy Secretary of Trade and Commerce talking about reopening. I could not be on that call. I asked if Ms. Severchek could sub in for me on it. She was there. Another city manager was on the call from Danville, who's on the executive committee as well. And between the two of them, they were able to offer meaningful input that I think the Deputy Secretary took the next day to the governor's reopening meeting, which was the last reopening meeting they were going to have, and some of those critical feedback that they gave was, you know, what is the expectation of cities? So I think this is key access to the higher levels of state government. They have lobbied for us. They've carried legislation for us. And I think they've done a lot of work, but I was pulled aside also by Jim Regenbald, who's the fiscal analysis. He's the one that can predict the state, that works really hard on looking at state budgets. He developed one of the models that we have used to help with the COVID-19 impacts. And he said that we were really missing out by not being part of the VML lobbying effort. He said that he could see, because VML ends up doing a whole lot of work for the cities that we just basically get to accept as being part of, and we're not paying our responsible piece of it. And staff has lost that access. I was talking to Ms. Severchek and asking her about this, and she said that staff felt a real gap in basically outreach and lobbying and appeals. And Ms. Severchek, could you help me with that? Do you have any better examples than what you said that staff felt a gap in the lobbying efforts from VML?
We did, actually. VML, I think Virginia First Cities does an extraordinary job representing just older, larger cities around the Commonwealth. However, VML does a better job on the legislative piece of it in informing us on a more regular basis of legislation that is being proposed in the work that they're doing. So I think that they each have their strengths, and staff, and I believe the city attorney would also attest that we missed some beats regarding legislation updates from VML this year as we were not a member.
What's the cost for VML?
I think it's about $28,000.
So significant. So contrary to what Mr. Heggleson's asking, you know, I think Virginia First Cities is important. I think we're going to get value out of it, and I think we missed out on VML. Now, I agree with other members of council that said they didn't think they got a lot out of the conferences. I didn't either, but the question is, what is the lobbying arm? What is the value of that lobbying arm? And I believe that the value of that lobbying arm supports the membership dues for VML. You. So I would actually like to add the VML amount in. I don't know how we're going to pay for it, but I'd be curious to see what council thinks.
I guess if we can take this one first as it is.
That's
now,
fine.
I'm trying to find
right.
money for.
Yes, you are.
Yeah, and so with that, if we can, you know, again, if you want the conferences, the training and conferences for city council, and I think the dues of The dues, it's a question of, do we want to keep in that 22,900 for the Virginia First Cities? But I think the bulk of it, we could be able to remove, you know, again, for our, the city manager and deputy city manager. So.
Thank you. Councilmember Wilder.
Because we are hiring the process of hiring a new city manager, and we're not sure what the requirements they might have as he or she come in, or what training requirements they might request. And for us to say before you come in, you don't have any kind of a training budget or any kind of a budget to be a part of anything, that might be a little challenging to bring in a new person, a qualified person to manage our city. And we tell them, oh, by the way, you don't even have a budget for any kind of a training. So that part concerns me. The part about city council, the $15,000, is that just for training, or what is that for?
The city council training and conferences includes $3,500 for you to attend the VML conference. Even though we are not members, we still have an opportunity to go to their conference. I don't know that anybody participated this past year, but that money is in there as a placeholder for that. There is $10,500 included as miscellaneous travel to be approved by council. In the past, some members have gone to the National League of Cities Conference. That money has not been used in the past year. And there is $1,200 included for newly elected officials training that is sponsored by VML.
Why don't we just use the part for we know we're going to have at least one new member, maybe more, but we know we're going to have at least one new member. So we might want to keep that part in there, but maybe take the other part. Like I went to the national conference, but I just paid myself. I didn't ask for any reimbursement whatsoever. So why don't we just take that portion out and leave in the part for new members?
So you're suggesting to take out funding for the VML conference of $3,500 and the miscellaneous travel of $10,500?
Yes, as I'm suggesting that part.
So one thing, if we want to just make this, I guess, easier, I'll make a motion. If we just, first of all, remove the $22,850 plus the $5,925. So that would keep the other in there. It would remove the city manager's conferences, training, and it would remove the city managers and staff's dues. So that would be the total of like about 29,000. So I'll make that as a motion.
Is there a second? The motion fails due to no second. Is there another motion regarding the budget or further discussion? I know I would like to make some comments. I think anytime you aren't continuously learning, building relationships, having lobbying efforts, you die as a city. And so I believe that to set ourselves up to not have a budget for a new potential city manager, we are setting ourselves up for failure on that person's part. I believe that council members, whatever outcomes or future is, we need those opportunities to attend events to learn more. No one comes into this seat knowing everything. And so I think we need the opportunity to go to different strategy sessions to learn more of what other council members, boards of supervisors are doing, other localities. A lot of the state information is brought to those sessions, as well as Councilmember Para pointed out with Mr. Regenball, that he will present sessions and other experts regarding the state, the economy, legislation. So I would like to say that we need to leave that intact and whole for all of the reasons stated. And I would like to make that as a motion, and I will ask for a second.
I will second that.
Is there any further discussion from any council members on that? Councilmember Wright, followed by Councilmember Wilder.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I appreciate the points that were made, though. You know, I think given sort of where we are right now, I'd have a hard time supporting the full budget for city council trainings. I think Councilmember Wilder makes a good point to leave, you know, $1,200 in the budget for new member orientation. I think that that's appropriate, but I don't think we need the remainder of those funds. And And then I would ask for so dues and memberships were brought up, and I'm curious, since it's just been us talking about dues and memberships, what city leadership and management whose funds are implicated here, how necessary are these trainings and certifications? Can you tell us about them?
Sure. So first off, I would say that council has a contractual arrangement with the city manager that includes funding for training and conferences, and to not fund that would be a breach of that contract. And I hope that that would be included in the contract with the next city manager, as I agree with the mayor that lifelong learning is critical to our success. That is, I hope critical to your success. I am a strong believer in continuous learning and training and conferences. The city manager, the deputy city manager, and the assistant city manager were gone together one day this past year, not a multitude of days where there was none of us here. So I want to correct Councilmember Hegelson on that. The other thing that I want to say, and frankly, I'm really insulted once again when the salary of the city manager is talked about as being the highest salary amongst staff as it is for any CEO in a business. And while I have not brought this up ever in the past, I will say that when you considered the recommendations in the Korn Ferry study, and every single employee in this city who was not at the minimum of their salary range was moved to the minimum of their salary range, except for one, and that is the city manager. So I hope as you recruit the next city manager, you will pay that person, he or she, at least the minimum of the salary range.
Thank you.
Thank you. So sorry, I appreciate all that very much. The $5,900 for dues and memberships that's been discussed. Can you share with us what exactly those dues and memberships are?
The dues and...
Sorry, for the city manager, deputy city manager. Is that an ICMA?
Yeah, sure. So that is for membership in the International City County Management Association and the Virginia Local Government Management Association.
Okay. So, given, again, I guess I would like to make a motion.
Amendment, yeah. Would you like to make an amendment? Right, the motion currently is to keep everything.
You have, yeah. Well, then unless you're willing to accept an amendment to remove the $15,000 less $1,200 for new member orientation, if you'll accept that amendment, then appreciate it. Otherwise, I will be voting against the motion.
This is to remove the entire $15,000 or just the $1,200 from the?
Remove all, but keep the $1,200,
okay.
But remove the rest.
Yeah, so that would mean that you would be taking out the $3,500 for the VML conference for 5 council members to attend, and the $10,500 in miscellaneous travel in the city council component of training and conferences for a total of $14,000.
All right. So now, if I accept that amendment and we put that into the vote, in the future, should a council member decide to go, because I will remind everyone that we, in this time of austerity, we took away the salary increases for council. And so we are saying that there will be no training budget for council members should they decide to go to the organizations. So I'm just understanding that.
Certainly, Madam Mayor, we could always put it on the list for future deliberation, say in October if we find that situation has changed.
Okay. All right, Councilmember Hegelson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. With this is actually the opposite of what I suggested. And I understand perfectly well, Ms. City Manager, that the contractual obligation though ends September 30th, right? And this budget begins July 1st. So the important part of this budget beginning July 1st is to not do the mistakes that we've done before, was my recommendation, because of the fact of when you hire an expert, as Councilmember Wilder said, as we're interviewing and we're reviewing, we typically hire the expert that has had the training. And I recognize there's goodwill that can be built and camaraderie and whatnot, but that's a lot of time. And you know, when I look at other departments, and especially in a time of austerity, and this doesn't even affect you because you're gone. When we hired a city manager before, I'm looking at the salaries here. Our previous city manager made less than what the deputy does now. And that was after about 14
That
years
is
of
not
experience.
correct.
It was about 150.
That is not correct.
It was 150
It
at
is
the
not
end.
correct.
At the end is where we bumped him up. And then at that end, after 18 years of experience, we started somebody without the experience, and no problem with that, but where he left. And so with that, at our new budget, so again, this is a new budget. It says, actually, I mean, it had nothing to really do with you, but I guess you thought it did. The new budget with a new city manager, what we should probably do is if we hire somebody without that experience, kind of like in the school division, kind of like in other things, when people don't have that experience, you pay them less. When people have lots of experience, you pay them more. We don't just say, hey, because the last one was at this level, the next one will be at that level too. So that is...
Practice is to pay somebody the value in the market.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that's a function of what we do as far as who we hire. And you know, and I look at this, you know, since you brought this up, previously we had a city manager and a deputy. We've since added an assistant. And so with that.
That position was added prior to the former city manager leaving.
Yeah, right before.
For the record.
Yeah, right before. And so with that, thank you for the interruption. But with that, I just think that for city managers, and again, I recognize, you know, going on junkets are kind of fun and whatnot, but getting training,
That is insulting.
especially.
I will not use taxpayer dollars for a junket,
Well, I mean,
council member.
I'm looking at here quite a bit of dollars going out, and, you know, again, so my motion died, but that's why I'm against spending that kind of money for people that are highly paid. I think some of the representatives, I don't use those trips either, and so I'd be happy to vote against those, but I think it's probably good for somebody who is a non-professional, not highly paid, as our and that goes on, you know, that can get, I think that's good for council to do that. I don't do it, but I think it would be good for other council members too.
Councilmember Perry, I'll defer to you, and then I have comments after.
Was the friendly amendment accepted or not?
You know what, I will accept the friendly amendment of reducing the 14,000 out of that, so yes,
All right, well,
it was accepted.
That would change my vote then. I was ready to support your original motion. And the reason is thus. This is one of those areas in the budget where money can be appropriated, but it doesn't have to be spent. And it historically has not been fully spent. So therefore, it's dropped straight to fund balance and carryover for pay-as-you-go funding for the next year. I think it is awfully presumptuous to not budget for training for potential council members. There are potentially 3 new council members that are going to come on. You allocated $1,500 total. I think $1,200. It's going to take more than that because the original line item was what, 20-something, right? Or whatever. What was the original line item for that? I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me.
$1,200 for newly elected officials training.
And training for city council.
So would we cut 15. The 10 less the 12? What was the 10 less 1,200 gives you the?
It's 15.
Of the 15,000.
Correct.
All but 12?
Right. So
all but
1,200. So I think you need to leave the 15,000 in. And if it's not used, it falls to fund balance. Training's important for council members, especially if there are 3 new council members that come on board. I only say 3 because council member Hogan's unopposed. You know, it could have been 4 if he was opposed. Then they need to understand and have the opportunity to go to Virginia First Cities, have the opportunity to go to Virginia Municipal League, to see if it's beneficial or not to go to the National League of Cities. I've been to all of those, and I've made up my mind which ones are beneficial or not, but a new council member may have different opinions. But one of the valuable things that you get from that is making connections, meeting various people. And it's one of the reasons why I'm able to make some connections in trying to solve one of the city's problems right now regarding solid waste. Because I know the groups associated with this from various meetings and associations. I think it's important. It's not necessarily going to be spent. Let's budget it. And I know that staff is going to be diligent in what they choose to spend on, because as the same manager said, she's not going to spend taxpayer dollars on junkets, and I believe her. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember Pero. And I just wanted to say that in the time of recruitment and in the times that we are in now, and just in any normal times, you do look at the position in the market and the position and the value and the role and the duties and responsibilities, and you pay accordingly. And I can tell you, or the viewing public, that in sitting on several recruitment committees for positions, even one currently that Councilmember Pero and I are sitting on for the Housing Authority, that the market dictates the value and the expertise of the person you get. And so I just want the viewing committee to understand, or the viewing audience to understand, that you have to, in these days and times, pay professionals their value, their roles, their responsibilities. And so when you're running an entire city, the salary that is decided upon by the council is one that is agreed upon. It is worth the value. And for clarification, our current city manager, just to know, that was in our city prior of about 17 years of duty, responsibilities, and role prior to coming into the current position. And so because we valued the position, the experience brought into that is why the salary was set, agreed upon by all council members. And so I wanted to clarify that, to make sure people understand what it takes to run a city, so that people don't minimize what is a part of our state obligation as well, to have that role. So I just wanted to say that the motion was that I accepted the amendment to remove the $14,000, leaving the remaining in the budget. If there's no further discussion, I'm ready to call for a vote.
So the total on that, instead of the 62,000, would be 48,430. I guess there's an extra $1 in there, so 436. Is that right?
72,852 minus 14.
Correct.
Oh, that's the balance. Okay, sorry.
Right.
58,852.
So 72 minus the 14,001.
58,851.
Okay, just so you're clear.
Can we just get a recap and over it?
Okay, what we are doing is we are keeping the training dollars and conferences in place, with dues and memberships in place. We are removing the approximately $14,000 from the city council training budget, and that amount, again, Ms. Witt, is, I'm sorry,
58,851.
so we are reducing it to 58,851. Thank you. If everyone's in understanding of that, and I will call for a vote. Councilmember Wright?
Aye.
Councilmember Wilder?
Aye.
Councilmember Nelson?
Aye.
Councilmember Pero?
No.
Councilmember Helgeson?
No.
Vice Mayor Dolan?
Aye.
And aye, so the motion passes. Thank you. All right, that was 34.
I believe you are back at item 32.
Okay. All right. I
Which
was
is
looking-
Lynchburg City School funding.
Yeah, I don't know why I was looking
Madam Mayor?
at page 1. Yes.
Could we, I'd like if we could go actually to the fire department, because, I mean, there was, I don't see the numbers on here, but adding the unit, like Councilmember Nelson had brought up last time, lots of things, we can kind of look at what's left over or whatnot, or we can say, let's vote on something that we want to do, because this is our budget, it's our goals and our objectives, and let's add those 9 firefighters for that medic unit, and like Councilmember Nelson had pushed last time, whether it be in January, whether it be July 1st, or whether it be, I think, is this new number, Councilmember Nelson, number 19, is that starting?
Which option?
Is that, yeah, is that, 19, new option B? Is that the one you were?
Yes, that was, if I may, that was the item that I had suggested. But at this point, I don't think we have enough money left on the table to do much of anything to the fire department.
Well, I guess if we did that, then we could look to see where the extra funds are on the other elements. So rather than kind of backing into it and saying, hey, if we got money left over, I'd like to see us say, we care about our citizen safety, and let's make that as a priority, and let's not back into the number how much we got left over as a kind of like a tip, but to say, hey, we need this medic unit because the city has grown. I mean, this was before Cornerstone, this was before Windhurst, this is a lot more people that are out that direction. Having that medic unit, so they're not unresponsive, and they're already out, I think would be wise. So, and then we can kind of back into figuring out where we're going to get the funds from.
Thank you, Councilmember Hegelson. If I would like to say, because I'm running the list, I would like to go to schools. Thank you. So we will be discussing number 32, school operating, $39,828,498. School funding, reducing $2.2 million from schools fiscal year 2021 request. $42 million is the school's request, $40 million is the manager's proposed with a $1.5 million reduction, and $39 million is the manager's proposed revised with a $700,000 reduction due to COVID-19. So,
could we get the staff to go through this, because I'm having a little trouble following?
Yes. Ms. Witt is
Thank
prepared
you,
for
Councilmember
attachment A, which includes, the school board had a meeting on Thursday evening, and they adopted a revised request to the city, which is a reduction in their city funding from their original.
Mr. Vracek, can I interrupt for just a second? Could you really just start from the left and work to the right, because there's some columns here that I really don't get. And I don't understand why the numbers have moved so much.
Donna's got it.
Looking at this thing that's...
the longer sheet. Thank you. Ms. Witt?
Okay, sure. Starting at the very left, what you see is, this is page 267 in your budget book that we have revised to hopefully give you additional information. So you'll have the actual 2019, the adopted budget for schools, the amended 2020 for schools, which shows that they gave the $800,000 back to the city, and then the COVID-19 revised amended, which shows for the city funding less the $1.5 million.
Okay, so that's where we made the adjustment to the budget, that's the presumed fund balance that we would get, and we pulled the 1.5 out.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so that was amended a couple weeks ago, and that's where the budget stands today.
That's correct. So then your next
Which
two
is
columns.
That's the COVID-19 FY20.
Revised? No.
Yeah, because we, in council action for fiscal year 2020, we reduced funding to city schools by $1.5 million. It's for current year, 2020. Okay, so that's what that column shows. The next two columns are the original schools submitted, and then the manager's proposed. So this is going to show you where they requested the $42 million from the city, and the city manager proposed the $1.5 million less. The next column is based on the school board meeting last Thursday night, which shows they adopted option B for their request. So in this column, you'll notice they have a reduction that they think they'll get in state funding. They added estimated what they called stimulus gap filler, so that would be the CARES money, and then an additional 1.5 million that they are calling from FY20 fund balance gap filler. So that would be carrying 1.5 million from 20 into 21.
So that's additional fund balance?
Yes, yes. And then they are requesting, the school board voted to request $41 million, or an additional $1 million back from the city.
Right.
So they went from 42 million down to 41 million. So it's $1 million less than they had originally requested.
So Ms. Witt, why is there a reduction of $3.5 million in the state funding when I thought the state funding reduction was $700,000?
Kim LaConch is here, and she can explain this and just keep me honest, okay? I believe that is what the schools is expecting as a reduction from the state based on sales tax. The 50, why it's 52,855 from the state. Oh, I'm sorry, here.
Ms. LaConch, yeah, if you could come over. Thank you.
Oh, here's, so there's one for Crystal as well. I apologize, Kim. Yep. Here's another one.
Just sit down next to her. You got to get your heads together on that. Well, within 6 feet of her.
So the 52,855 in the option B, this is because you're anticipating less state funding for sales tax.
Correct. There were different scenarios that had some reductions that were in there. There was a 10, 20, and a 30% reduction. And option B was
20%.
20%. Yes. Correct. Is it okay if I keep this?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, please.
All right, thank you. Hold on 1 minute with Ms. LaConch. Did everyone understand what she said? Did they hear her? Can you explain that again to make sure? Because I know I didn't hear all of it. So, yeah, if you could.
So what was presented to the board meeting was taking the new state numbers, and then there was different options, and it would take a projected, we don't know what the sales tax, I mean, just the challenges that you're having. We did a projection of 10%, a 20%, and a 30%, and we presented that to our board, as well as including what a reduction in the local contribution of being 1 million, 1.5, and 2.2, and showed that our board the overall results, and that's where they voted to go with option B.
Ms. Witt, what's the sales tax reduction that the city's anticipating?
For 2021, and you're asking me off the top of my head, I think it's about 20%.
I thought it was 5%
Annualized, but for first quarter, we're looking about 20%.
And does this assume 20% first quarter or 20% annualized?
They were doing annual, and what the guidance we have been given was that localities have a better chance of, they can look at their local. We have to look at the state. It's not just what your revenue is in Lynchburg, it's for the state of Virginia. And the guidance that we're getting from the state superintendents and everyone is to prepare for 25%. We did go with option B, which was a little bit less. We're trying to be a little bit optimistic, but we've been cautioned to be prepared for, the latest was to use 25. Some schools divisions are using up to 50%. So we were looking at 25%, and the lottery decrease, the latest was a 28% decrease in our lottery funds, and that number is supposed to be updated next week to see what the April sales are. So we have a million different models out there, but we're just like everyone else. We do not know where it's going to fall.
So
all right.
Number 3 has the number 733,000. What is 733,000? Because that's supposed to be the reduction in state funding, right?
So if you look at expenditures, what they had originally submitted was 101,331,596, and then if you look at the state revenue between what was originally submitted is 57,254,598. And then the, what they presented to council on May 5th, because again, I mean, as time goes by, you learn more. So on May 5th, they presented their state revenue as $56,521,193, and that difference is the $733,405. And so the only reduction to expenditures that I could find that I understood was that $733,405. That when you pulled that out, you pulled out some expenditures.
Correct. Okay. All right, thank you. Councilmember Wright, did you have a question? I know I saw Councilmember Nelson's hand.
No, I'm happy to defer.
Okay, Councilmember Nelson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Mitch, had a couple of clarifying questions. Back on April 14th, Councilmember Helgeson asked the superintendent what would be the projected fund balance. And in response, the following day, I think it was identified to be about $1,500,000 plus. Last Tuesday, this time, I asked the same question. And the following day, the superintendent told me it was the same figure as was given on April 14th, $1,501,850. And then at your school board meeting last week, the question was discussed, and I think I heard you say, and maybe I didn't hear it clearly, you indicated that you really couldn't project accurately because the April figures would not be until May 15th, which is this Friday. And up till April, things were going fairly flat in terms that COVID-19 had not affected the lottery or the sales tax revenues. So April was the first month that we were really closed down substantially for the entire period of the month. So those figures would be indicative of what was really happening in the economy as it would affect the schools. Yesterday, I saw an email from the Lynchburg City Schools that said you all had done some recalculations and the end of year fund balance could be as high as $2 million plus or as low as $343,000. And doing some reconciliation, you identified a possible approximate figure of $1,365,155, which is sort of splitting the difference. How was that arrived at? Did the state figures come in earlier than this Friday?
No,
or
sir.
What are you looking at?
We are still awaiting the numbers that'll come in on the March 15th EDI, and that will give us some idea because our sales tax does have a 2-month delay, so we'll have a better understanding, and we get those payments twice a month, so we're eagerly waiting to update those accordingly. What we've done with the fund balance projection, it's so many moving parts, and at some points they're saying the lottery funds are stabilized, we're going to be okay, and then the next week they can say you need to anticipate a 20% reduction, a 28% reduction. They're not guaranteed. The sales tax has never been guaranteed, and we've always monitored that. We just don't know what the cut's going to be. The other challenge that we have is, well, we did get updated ADM numbers. They have not hit the calc tool yet, but we overrode it to see that we were getting a few $100,000 more because our ADM had increased. So that was factored in. We also every week we have to update our health insurance because we are self-insured. And one of the things that we have had was we've experienced really high claims this year. We were expecting that would drop off with them not having, the elective procedures and all. We did not see that. In the last week or so, they have started to drop off. So as those drop off, our projections are going to go up. And so it's just a moving target at this point. The 1.5 that we initially had stated, that was what we were attributing to COVID. We had taken out what overtime did we have remaining for the year, the substitutes that we weren't going to be paying. That's where that 1.5 came from initially.
All right. So interpreting or translating that, are you suggesting that this time next week there will be some more accurate figures since those earlier real data will be here?
We will have another payment. So we still have two payments in May and two payments in June. We also have 2 payments of sales tax in July. So all the lottery funds, the one thing that is not, that we still have 6 more payments is the sales tax, because we pushed back the July because it's recognized in this year. So we still have 6 payments of the sales tax that we do not know. So as every 2 weeks goes by, we will have more accurate data, as well as knowing what the claims are going to be. One thing, we're waiting to see if we have waivers on some of the maintenance of effort requirements that we have at this point. There is one that we have not gotten a waiver on, and so we have that included in our projections, and that is just under $500,000. So there are a lot of moving parts, but this is the most. We have different models with, if sales tax is 25% less, we have some, if the lottery is 25% less, but as we keep going forward, we will be able to tighten that up.
So understand why it's a moving target. It's moving for everybody.
Yes, sir.
Are you saying that this Friday is the next pay date that you will get the figures as to what you're going to receive from the state?
We will see just that one payment.
All right.
So it's basically waiting for that May 15th, the May 31st, the June 15th, and the June 30th. And then we have to wait until July 15th to see what that what those payments are, because that'll come back as revenue in this year, as well as we have to wait until after the end of July, and then our consultants will run the true up to see what kind of liability we have to have for our health insurance.
Certainly we have to pass a budget this fiscal year. We can't wait till July or even very far into June. But would it be helpful, if we're trying to hit that moving target, to have that target more stabilized before we make a decision? Otherwise, we are really operating in the blind, aren't we?
I would welcome to know how to, we don't have that crystal ball to know what that is.
No. Go ahead. Go ahead.
So, I welcome any input. We can run any scenarios. We just, at this point, the guidance has been to use the 25% sales tax.
So waiting to have those actual figures from this Friday is not going to be beneficial one way or the other?
We will have one more payment, one more payment that'll get us a little bit closer. Usually what we receive in sales tax in the midway through the month is what we receive at the end of the month. So it gives us an idea of what we receive on Friday. If nothing else has changed in the way they make those payments, we usually project that out to be what we're going to get for both payments on sales tax. And I would continue to do the same unless they gave me some idea that they were going to change that.
I think that's a very reasonable approach to take. The past month and a half we've experienced a complete shutdown. Wasn't even thinking about moving out and getting the economy back up. Right now, that's being discussed and there are plans in place. So having that data from a time when things were very, very, very bad might be a good predictor as to whether or not it at least may not be worse as we move into the end of May and June. Is that a reasonable inference?
It could possibly give us another month's worth of sales tax to get us closer to what we would have. And this is just for the fund balance projection. But yes, sir, that would be accurate.
Okay. Well, I really appreciate that. It's difficult. Nobody's seen this economic or business landscape before, and we're having to learn on the run, I suppose. Okay, that's all at this point that I was asking, as to whether it'd be beneficial before we make a definitive decision on a budget to at least have a little more data available for the school division to make that assessment.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Councilmember Pero?
Just a quick follow-up regarding lottery proceeds. For the past 3 years, what's the trend been for receipts from the lottery?
I would have to pull that, but I could get that for you.
Just round number, is it down?
We have received whatever was allocated by the state. We've never had a shortfall. This is the first time I've actually heard to look out for your lottery.
All right, so Mr. Verchek, Virginia First Cities has been monitoring lottery proceeds. I thought the lottery proceeds across the state were down, which is one of the reasons why the gaming law, or I guess bill, passed, and because that was taking money out of the lottery proceeds. I'm trying to remember when that goes into effect, and that that didn't get delayed, I don't think. So it's probably January 1, which is designed to help funnel money back into the lottery. So I'd be kind of curious if the proceeds have been declining, and maybe that the passing of this new state code would put more money back towards that. Okay, that's okay.
I can check, and there was something in the initial governor's budget. It was called Games of Skills, and that was supposed to supplement the lottery because that's where they were seeing some decrease, but that was taken out.
It was taken out.
It was on the school side. I can't speak to what you were referring to.
There's a summary of lottery-funded programs on page 269 of your budget, and generally amongst the lottery-funded programs, there is a downward trend.
Say that again, ma'am.
There is, if you look at the various lottery-funded programs.
Oh, yes.
There is a downward trend in most of the categories.
Okay. So it's possible that trend could reverse, which would ease some pressure on future budgets. Okay. That's me.
Thank you, Councilmember. Thank you, Councilmember Pero. Councilmember Nelson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I did have one other question.
Okay.
This is the first time I've seen this spreadsheet this afternoon, so I need some education. Let me ask you, is whatever projected estimated fund balance that will accrue at the end of this fiscal year, is that on here and used as a calculation for what your deficits or needs are, or is that separate? It looks like it might be the $1,500,000, but
that is not on attachment.
okay, so if
Is fund balance on it?
Oh, the 1.5, I'm sorry.
That is entitled Estimated Usable Fiscal Year 20 Fund Balance Gap Filler. That would be,
That was awful. Yes, ma'am. it was.
okay, so to answer my question, that's already being calculated to derive the bottom line that you would need. And if it were $1.5 million, there would still be a shortfall of $582,978.
Correct. And we've had things change since we've even had this meeting, that our Medicaid money, we've been told that would go down 20%. We have an area in our budget that is for charges for other services, and that makes up over $1 million, and that includes some of the things as like non-resident tuition, bus rentals, facility rentals, student fees. We have those in our budget. We do have no idea what the impact is going to be if the schools don't open. Are we going to be having field trips? Are we going to be, our parents are going to be willing to pay for their kids to, their non-resident tuition to have their kids come to Lynchburg City Schools if the schools aren't open. So we have those unknown as well. So it's in addition to the state funding, in the locality, we still have other areas in our budget that are still moving, and they are not moving in the right direction.
So,
Stimulus funds have gone down.
Yes, that's correct. The stimulus funds have gone down from what was predicted initially. That has gone, it's 3.3 million, but when you back out the percentage that goes to the private schools, you will end up with $2,466,090.85.
So last week I told you that the social distancing thing.
I know, I got it. Thank you.
Last week I told you that percentage was 22% that would go to non-public private schools. Our application opened yesterday, last night, and when we looked in it, it's actually 25.5%. So additional funds were pulled out to go to private schools. So the number that you have here, the 2.583, and I think there was a question why in our most updated communication to you it went down to 2.44, I think is the number. That's because that money, that amount has changed in terms of what we are receiving from the CARES Act.
So, Ms. Lukinich, the proposal that I made a couple of weeks ago with regard to authorizing the school to treat any and all of its fund balance to be held to fill the gap, this spreadsheet already assumes that that would be approved by council?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And based off of how the health insurance
Right.
Comes out, how the sales tax is going to fluctuate, but that was using the percentages that other school divisions and the guidance from the state has been for forecasting.
So the only way at this point, given what money is available for you to actually fully bridge the gap of $582,978 is for the state funding to get a lot better between now and the end of June.
That would be correct, as well as this doesn't take into, these numbers don't take into what I was just referring to as far as the Medicaid reduction, and if those charges for services do not, because it's $1 million right there, if those don't pan out because the schools do not open. So we don't know the full impact of it, and we're anxious to see what the school's going to look like come next year.
Ms. Lukinich, thank you so very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Councilmember Helgeson?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. You know, it looks like a lot of this is moving parts, and we're discussing your possible revenue. Obviously, the revenue from the state or from sales tax or from the federal small portion, all of those things are possible revenue. We don't have control over the others. We don't have control of your expenditures. That's the school board. And so with that, but we do have control over how much we spend of our local tax dollars on the local school budget. So if you have less funds that are coming in, obviously that means you have less, you have more discernment you have to make on the budget. And looking at the spreadsheet, and as Councilmember Nelson just stated, I just got this too, so the first time looking at it. So I guess, one, I was really shocked, saddened, surprised at the school board's recommendation to ask for $1 million more than what the city manager proposed, and then what the new numbers were. It looks like now it's $1.2 million more, plus using, as Councilmember Nelson just stated, this year's extra fund balance, which normally goes to fix roofs and put in new tennis courts and those kind of things, that would be then used for operating. So now you're actually looking at $2.7 million more than was presented. And so with that, it's gotten worse as I'm seeing this. Am I reading that correctly, or am I not reading that correctly? Because the city manager proposed $39.8 million of local dollars. The school board said, no, we want more than that. We want $41 million, plus we want another $1.5.
Well, the school board originally proposed flat funding of $42 million.
Well, this is actually more. We're up to $42.5 now.
When we first did our budget
Yep.
for proposal, we asked for level funding.
Yep.
And that was even at a time where we were going to experience a 2% increase, and we were finding all of that within our budget. Since then, and even with the potential reduction in sales tax and in lottery funding and the unknown and the rentals and things like that, that they have reduced that to $41 million from their original.
But then it's adding in an extra $1.5.
For that was the fund balance projection to hold us.
Yeah, to be utilized in operating. Normally, that fund balance is not used for operating.
And normally, we don't have a sales tax problem or a lottery problem, so we're not talking normally anymore. I think we are looking at abnormally. We're trying to do the best as the city is to cover the gaps.
Yeah, and so with that, that's your, and the school board's obligation is to, they would do that with their expenditures, not just simply saying, we need more. Last time, and I realize it's not you, it's the school board that I am really disappointed with. We came up with some numbers. Really surprised to see, kind of not even listening to what council said, asking for $1.2 million more. Last time you said the city and the schools are in kind of partnership together, and I said, yeah, it's the cities, the schools, and our boss, which is our city taxpayers. And so now for one of those three to say, hey, we're not even going to go with option C, as council and the city manager and staff has proposed. We want an additional $1.2 million. I don't know what, I recognize the desire and I recognize the passion, but to me, it looks like, it reminds me of someone that didn't get their way and stomping their foot, saying, we want it. I mean, that looks bad. I've heard from school teachers and administrators too that have said, this looks bad. The school board, I recognize you think you're doing a good thing, but it looks bad, it looks selfish. It looks extremely selfish, and it looks like the fact of saying that not living in the world that we're in. I mean, we're in a world, as you just stated, there's some trouble now. With that trouble, we all kind of work together, not just pitch in an extra 1.2 million plus the extra 1.5 million, of which we're trying to figure out how we can get another medic unit. We're trying to figure out how we're going to fix a $6.5 million budget gap. And then so to pay more, I don't know how that's even a starter. I mean, Councilmember Pero, I think, hit the nail on the head. He said, well, next meeting, we're going to talk a lot about this. It's going to go and it's going to come back and say we want this. And I'm surprised that you said you wanted more. So I don't know how we do that. I am very saddened to hear the less of money coming in from the state and the numbers coming in. But to throw it yet even more on the back of our local taxpayers, which I don't know where that extra 1.2 million would come from. So it's kind of a non-starter. So, but I guess we had lots of time.
Councilmember Wright.
So obviously we do have to, balance this budget. That is our big challenge. And I know, just based on the responsiveness of the schools team, that you all want to be part of the solution, and I just have to say I am dismayed, incredibly dismayed by the conduct that we just saw, and chiding professionals and the citizens that serve on the school board. I don't think, nor do I think that the community thinks that the school board or the leadership of the schools are being selfish, as has been said. I think that what you all are attempting to do is hit, as we have described, as a moving target and do what is in the best interest of our families and our kids, as we are all trying to do. And that kind of inflammatory, divisive rhetoric has no place in this chamber and is an insult to the people who are tasked every day with coming to work to educate our kids. And I take personal offense at those remarks, and I want to make sure that's very clear here. So to Councilmember Nelson's question earlier about, given that this is a moving target, would you all appreciate a little bit more time to sort of see the revenue come in and get best estimates? If we were to hold on making this decision, not obviously until mid-June, I think that's obviously too late. These are big decisions and we need to make them expeditiously. But if we were to give you until, say, another 2 weeks before we made this decision, do you think you'd be able to come back with better data for us?
We would have the revenue that's received this Friday, and then we would project out the sales tax to be what it's going to, if the pattern continues, the trend continues, we would have what it's going to be at the end of May. We would have another set of health insurance claims, because we get those weekly. So it would be a little bit more data. I do want to say, part of the requests that we have given guidance to the school board is that we do show that the state's giving an additional $2.5 million. If we're using that, they kept the sales tax the same increase as it was pre-COVID, which we know is unrealistic. And then if we take their percentages that they're saying, that lottery's down 28%, we'll have updated numbers on that Tuesday. Sales tax, again, everyone's using the 25, some are using 50, but if we take that, of that 2.5, between 4.7 and 4.8 of that, they themselves are saying is at risk. And so it's hard for us when we have a budget that's primarily personnel, it's our people, to absorb that as well as to absorb a cut from the locality.
Okay. So, I mean, we were talking, this is potentially a pretty, $2.2 million is nothing to shake a stick at. Correct. It's a significant effect on a budget that is mostly non-discretionary.
Correct.
So, you know, I think we play for time here, and we try to get more data, and then, you know, on the 26th week, or if council so decides later, we can make a more informed decision. Not perfect, but a slightly more informed decision, which I think would be preferable to trying to do that this evening.
Okay. May I say something?
Yes, ma'am, please.
Each week on Tuesdays, it was Tuesdays and Thursdays, all of the state superintendents are on a conference call with Dr. Lane. We spent about 2 hours talking about nothing but budget and the moving target. I get to hear what my colleagues are doing, what they're thinking. I get their best estimate. I get information about how to make these predictions. And we've been doing that for Tuesdays and Thursdays. On Mondays, I talk to the Region 5 superintendents, and we all get together and we discuss the same things. And I also talk to our counterparts that are close by, Nelson County, Appomattox. And we all get together and we discuss the same things. So I've spent a lot of time working through projections. Kim meets with the finance people. They do the same things. They're doing 25%, we're looking at 10, 20, 30. We come back and compare numbers to see, what do you have, what do I have? So we can make the best predictions. So I stand here before you saying this team and this team of the school board is doing a dynamic job with the information that we have, the moving target that we are faced with, to make the best prediction for what we need for our children. And while we're doing that, we are still serving them. We are still shutting down a command site, but making sure not one single kid has missed a meal. We are still preparing lessons for them. We are still delivering instruction. We are still holding graduation. We are still preparing for educating our kids. We are going to welcome them back. We're going to anticipate what mental health services they may need when they come back. We're getting ready for staggered schedules, social distancing. We're predicting if you can only have desks that are 6 feet apart, how do you put 25 kids in that classroom? Do you need more teachers? Do you need to space it out? Do you need to have staggered schedules? We are working on all of that, and none of that by any means is selfish. None of that by any means is just to benefit the two of us. It is all, every single hour, is to benefit every child and every family in this community. And yes, we did get our task at the beginning of this budget session, and I worked with the city manager, and the task was level funding. That was the task pre-COVID. The budget that you got pre-COVID was exactly matched to the task. Level funding. And even when the raises went up from what might have been 3% to 2 and 2, which would have been a 4%, the task was still the same, level funding. That's what we came in with. And we've adjusted that this past board meeting to be less than what we anticipated, not because we're trying to be selfish, because we're trying to do our part. Because we are trying, like you all, to guess in this economy what the needs are. And we don't have an emergency fund. I wish we did. I wish we had an emergency fund, because I would declare this an emergency and then use an emergency fund to help out. But we don't. So we can only work with what we have.
We have the revenue, we have the cuts, we absorbed the cut in the current year, the 1.5 million in the current year. We're still trying to pay our staff. With our stimulus funds, which we did get yesterday, we did get some guidance on it. And part of that guidance says other activities that are necessary to maintain operations and continue services and continue employing existing staff. That's what our stimulus money is supposed to be used for. We're also supposed to plan for long-term closures, including how to provide meals. That's what we're supposed to be. We're supposed to have technology and online learning for every child. That's what we're supposed to be talking about and doing here. Those are the things that we have been working on. How do we increase all of those things? But we are faced with right now our stimulus money. We're looking at the last bullet item on this to try to stay whole, to do our part so it does not fall on the city. I don't think that that is selfish. I do think that we are trying our best to make sure that our students are well taken care of.
Thank you. Councilmember Wilder had a question.
Yes, thank you so much
Thank
again.
you.
Thank you again for your report, and thank you for the work you do for our children in our community. Thank you for having the heart. I mean, that's just more than anything else. I was talking with Chuck Barber one time, and he says the main thing about working with kids is some people don't have heart. So I thank you for the heart and for the compassion you have for the children of our community. This is a challenging time period. We've never seen this COVID-19. It's horrible. I mean, it's unbelievable. So we as the community, it's important for us to show one of the number one things is the greatest gift that, I don't know if we can talk about religion, I don't want to get in trouble for that, is God gives us compassion and love. That's number one. And whether you're religious or whether you're not, we can all, I would hope we can agree upon that, and that we should have love for one another. So I appreciate you. I appreciate the work you're doing. I appreciate your passion and trying to figure out how we're going to serve your kids, our kids. They're all of our kids. How are we going to work with this together? Now, I just have not really a question for you, but I just need to make sure I understand certain things. Now, when it comes down to with the current budget now, how much is currently going to our fund balance? Just so I can understand, and what's the rationale to use some of that, just to make sure I'm clear. So do we have an amount for our current fund balance, or I know what is our
reserve
proposed reserve proportion that we're supposed to go into fund balance with our current budget? Does it account for that?
What's the 10%?
So council policy is that your fund balance will be 10% of revenues.
Okay.
As we initially proposed the budget for fiscal year 21, the first or second week of March, our fund balance was at 10.8%, I believe, which equates to about $1.8 million above the required 10%.
And
so there is $1.8 million more in the fund balance than what is required by council policy. Those funds are one-time funds.
But just a question, and I'm not saying we can use those, but just a question. Since this pandemic is a one-time issue, I mean, my challenge is this is a moving target. I got 10 different papers. I mean, I don't know how many. I'm confused, and I have a degree in accounting. That's my undergrad degree. I have so many papers, so many numbers. It is moving so many, and every day it's a different number. So it's such a challenging time period. Since this is we hope to goodness, and I can't say God, but hope to goodness we never see another pandemic again. Since it's a one-time situation, is this a time to use some of those? We still can't use none of those funds for something of this nature?
For ongoing expenses.
Is there anything in the budget that's not ongoing that we could use some of those expenses for, to reallocate money for the fire department, for the non-medic unit?
Well, if you hire people, that's an ongoing expense.
So as far as in the budget, is there anything that we could switch over? I'm just asking a question. Is anything we could switch over that we could use our fund balance for? Switch those over, that we have some funds for the fire department, the additional people, and for some additional funds? I'm not saying how much, but it's
you'd have to cut money in the operating budget from other budgets to put money there.
Okay.
Because that's your ongoing money.
Yeah, but there's no ongoing money that we have in the budget that we could use for. Okay, I'm just trying to find ways with this Yes, yes, I understand. I'm just trying to find ways that we as a community can put our heads together and figure out some additional sources of funds.
Right, and if I could,
Thank you.
I'm going to go to Councilmember Pero and Councilmember Hegelson in a minute. I just have a question. Does the budget still include salaries, steps?
No,
No, that was taken out.
Well, we took off the compensation package when we lost the first 1.5 million from the state.
Okay.
And then the additional million, we froze in salaries, and we wanted to do what you guys were doing, wait till October and see. In addition, we've frozen most of our new hires, so we have some positions that, even though the person is leaving, we haven't hired the new person to replace them in some cases. So we do have that. And I think that was a question that.
Working on those figures.
Yeah, I have some tentative figures, and as Kim said, one of the things is with special education maintenance of effort, so we have to work that out. But I'm looking at, at least just on classified alone, there's about $850,000 that's sitting there of positions that, these aren't new positions, these are existing people who have retired, resigned, or through attrition that I've just said, okay, don't repost. And I'll give you a perfect example of one of those positions that's just kind of on hold right now. We just announced our new EC Glass principal in-house. We have not posted for nor hired or to replace her position. It is on hold right now. That is one of those positions where that's an administrative position where we're sitting because, again, we're trying to be respectful and mindful and do our part. Now, that's not to say that I don't need an administrator to fill that role. That's to say that right now, I don't know when schools are going to open. I don't know the brick and mortar day. So I'm not going to make that decision until I get closer or have a little bit more information. I do have information. We're going into phase 1 on Friday. Phase 1 does not include opening schools. And I think we're going to stay in phase 1 to see where we get to phase 2, which is where I am. But I don't have a date for that yet. So those are the kinds of things that we have been doing, that we've been thoughtful and mindful of doing. And we've been watching every single penny trying to do it.
Thank you. Councilmember Pero?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. What you just said was kind of eye-opening because the operational expenses haven't changed. So they're going to change significantly. I imagine the step increase is a rather large number.
The step increase isn't included in here, but it is a pretty large number, yes.
So that means, but our operational numbers have not changed. Our operational expenses, so therefore that number should come down concurrently, right?
If we don't do the step increase, yes, right. But the money that we would save would be to fill the gap. So that's.
No, that's, you talk new revenue, you talk about expenses.
Correct.
If you're reducing your expenses, right?
Yes.
Okay. That's not shown on our spreadsheet here. Is that correct, Ms. Witt?
But the expense side was not presented to the board Thursday night.
Yeah.
All right. So there are going to be expense reductions, as Councilmember Nelson pointed out previously. But let me ask this, because I understand. I also think we're suffering from a symptom or a disease that is commonly associated with engineers, which is paralysis by overanalysis. At some point, you have to make a decision given the best information that you have. Now, we make our decision. That doesn't necessarily mean we can't change our mind in the future. If we need to make an adjustment in the future, that can be made. But we've got to get a budget passed before July 1. Can we go to the next to last column? I'm really curious. I don't want to belabor council's time. I'm really curious why we have $56.5 million in state revenue there versus the 52.8, and I'd like to zero in on what that sales tax reduction number could be, because I think the city and the schools need to be on the same page as sales tax reduction numbers, and that would modify the school's revenue somewhat significantly. So would you go over that with us, please?
Two things. This $56 million is what schools presented on May 5th to council. So they had reduced their state number by that 700,000 when they presented. So that's the number we picked up there.
So in 2 days, it dropped $4 million, basically.
Well, I mean, I think they're trying to figure out their state sales tax the way we are. So here's how state sales tax works. So of the 5.3% that we all pay when we buy something, 1% of what is spent in the city comes back to the city. 1% goes to schools, but it's not the same pot. It's 1% of state revenues based on school age population in the locality. So it's not the same 1% pot.
Okay, so that makes it harder, so they can't be the
Yes.
same number as us.
That's correct.
All right. I did a little research after the last meeting, and the reason that I get so frustrated with school revenues is if you look back at the chart, it's in the manager's message from 2012 to 2021. Schools' revenues increased by 22% over that course of time. The same period of time, city revenues in the general fund increased by 11%. So it's almost a 2-to-1 difference, and which is why I say that we've got to be very careful in the way that we're funding schools, because it's not sustainable for the city. I think we need to come up with a solution. Obviously, there need to be some adjustments on the operational expense side. We're showing the budget option B has almost a $600,000 shortfall in it. That's not correct. I'm not going to approve anything over the $39,828,498. I understand the risk that you all have from the state. So what do we need to do to move this list forward, Mr. Verchek? Right now, we've got the full number on it. What I'd like to do is make a motion to provide, I guess it would be just to zero that out, Mr. Verchek. What's the proper thing to do to get to your proposed number, which is effectively the next to last column in attachment A, the $39,828,498.
That's on 32 on the list.
It's number 32.
That's what's currently proposed.
That is the number on the list. All right. So what the list shows, because that number's in there, if we strike that off of the list, then it becomes no longer up for consideration. That's what will be funded, and that's in the budget, right?
That's correct.
All right, move to strike that off the list.
The motion has been made and second. Is there any further discussion? Councilmember Pero?
No, ma'am, we got to get this, we got to have this conversation.
Councilmember Helgelson?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I just had a couple questions on this new spreadsheet. So it looks like you already are estimating some stimulus money at $2.5 million?
It's 2.4.
Okay, well, I'm seeing 2.583. What's that?
That was what it was prior to yesterday when
Okay.
the actual numbers came out.
Okay, so I'm just getting this today, so I'm assuming this is, and so now this is also was showing, and again, I think as Councilmember Pero has said, it's the revenue is going to be changing and whatnot. Extra funds, an extra $1.5 million or $1.2 million coming from the city taxpayers, coming from the city coffers. I can appreciate Councilmember Wilder trying to figure out another place, but you can't take one-time money to do an operational expenditure. These funds have increased for many years. It would be nice, and I recognize, as I've said numerous times, and I appreciate you. And so I appreciate the fact that you have tried to do things by pulling in the reins. I look at these SOQ funded positions that you gave us. I look at hundreds of extra folks that are paid by our local taxpayers, and going with a budget that is approved by the city manager, recommended. It is something that we still don't have an extra $526,000 that we need to get a medic unit. I was hoping we could actually pitch in an extra $526 so we could get a medic unit. But I'll approve, or I'll vote for this motion because, as Councilmember Pero stated, we got a budget that we got to pass. The revenues are going to be very different. The revenues, I think you even calculate them even after September 30th when you get your ADM numbers, when you get your enrollment numbers. You're going to be truing up and seeing how much is coming in and how much is not coming in. I think last year we talked about the real need to understand, and the school board, to really understand the need of how we got to consolidate. Because when we have less kids, I recognize you have more need, trouble and whatnot. We have less students, but we have a lot more employees and a lot more money. I can feel your pain. I teach. I love seeing my kids. I hate going from seeing them in person to seeing them on a computer the next day. It didn't do good. It wasn't fun because I felt terrible for them because so much of their experience is actually running down the halls and joking with one another and pulling pigtails and having fun. You know, it's not just watching some professor lecture, you know, and so it's missing a lot for them. So I can feel the pain. I recognize as a teacher, as a professor, you like to engage, you like to, you know, get these things. And so I appreciate the difficulty that you're doing. But having a budget that proposes more, it's a non-starter. So I hope we can come up with this budget, and I hope you all can come up with a good solution as far as where items can be trimmed, which positions are not backfilled, and you can keep on moving forward. So thank you.
Councilmember Nelson, followed by Councilmember Wright.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I really do at this point feel very uneasy about going forward and approving a budget that, as it has been said, is a moving target. I'd like that target to become a little bit more stable. However, one of the things that is significant in balancing that budget is going to be just what the economy generates to the school division over the next 5 months. And that may be just about the same as it's doing each month now, or it may be substantially better. It should be better, but we don't know that. I know that we don't have any money to give and fill the school budget at this point from our revenues. There is one very tangible potential amount of money, and that's whatever would be the fiscal year 2020 LCS end of year balance. That could be as low as $300,000 as has been projected. It could be as much as $2 million. At this point, I don't want to try to identify and say, we'll give you that much. As I had proposed a week ago, I would be in favor, although at that time I said, give the first $700,000 of whatever fund balance is remaining, put it in a reserve fund, and once the economy has determined what your end of year balance would be, take the first $700 and give it to them. At this point, we can't use your fund balance for anything else but schools, either a one-time item or to fill your gap. I would consider anything that would fill this gap to be justifiable as a one-time item, given what the world economy and the circumstances are. I hope it never happens again, and I don't think it will happen again. Certainly, we've learned a lot over the last 3 months that may help us deal with it if it does happen again. But at this point, I would amend the motion and propose that whatever is the Lynchburg City School fund balance for 2020, that entire amount be allocated to the schools once it's identified to fill the fund balance gap, to fill the budget gap, and whatever is left over after that be used for capital improvements or other tangible one-time expenses. So it's just put on the side as a reserve budget gap reserve to be used probably in September, early October, to address the needs, whatever they may be at that time. That would be my motion to replace, otherwise accept the recommendation.
You said amendment. Was that a friendly amendment or is that a substitute motion?
It's
or
a
is
substitute. Unless if you had agreed to it as a friendly amendment, yes. But
so let me ask. So that's taking the 1.5 that we see in the 5/7/2020 option B. Take the 1.5 and putting that as part of the city allocation to schools, but as a reserve to be appropriated later?
I don't want to fix it at a definite amount because it may not be 1.5. It may be 400,000. But whatever is the fund balance, we're not going to make a decision on where that goes at this point. We'll put it in a reserve, and in October, when those figures are pretty stable, it'll be a determination of how much of that can fill the gap, if there's enough, And if it's more than enough, then the excess will be used to one-time expenses.
So it would be to clarify the city's intent of the use of the potential fund balance as a one-time fix for the upcoming operational year to effectively replace revenues that were lost.
Exactly.
And I can accept that as a friendly amendment.
Because clearly, we can't use that money for a fire department. We can only use it for some aspect of a school expenditure. Let's go ahead and address whatever may be the needs of an unknown need at this point, and then get back to dealing with balancing the list to deal with some of our other priorities.
So that's not a budgetary amount, but it's just an intent that that's how it'd be used.
We can't allocate it now in a budget,
So
but it's going to be, it'll serve as a fund to do.
so.
I think it should be two separate items then. You do one for the budget amount, that is the operating revenue. You do the other, which is the intent, because normally as the fund balance comes back, we then have a meeting that says, hey, allocate it for the bridge or allocate it for the roof or the, you know. So now if we do that now as a co-joiner with this, you know, but maybe make them separate since one is a budget item and the other is the full intent.
That would be agreeable. That is my desire and design, to express our intent now that when we deal with that fund balance, it's going to first go to balance whatever gap there is.
Could we resolve this and then come back to that issue, and you can make that as a motion?
All right, that's fine.
Okay, so to clarify, the motion, oh, no, I'm not going to clarify. Councilmember Wright had,
I'm fine to clarify.
okay. To clarify the motion is that the school's budget would be proposed and accepted as the the appropriation as the $39,828,498.
Which effectively strikes number 32 off the list.
Yes.
Yes, that is the motion now on the floor. Is there any further discussion? Councilmember Wright.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will be voting against this measure. I don't see why. We are close to 7 o'clock. It's not going to really make a big difference for our progress tonight for us to vote on this measure. You know, if we give it 2 weeks, we'll actually have more data, more information. We'll be able to make a more informed decision. I think that this is an unnecessary and very hasty and, dare I even say, reckless move to try to decide the budget tonight when there's in fact no imperative that we do so. So I would urge my colleagues to hold on this for 2 weeks so that we can at least figure out and get more information about what stimulus money can be used for. We'll also see additional revenue that will be coming in, which might be able to allow us to have better projections about where our end of year revenue is going to be. So there's no urgency here. We're manufacturing it, and I think we should just hold tight, get more information, and make a more informed decision in 2 weeks. So I'll be voting against the motion.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Dolan.
I also will be voting against this motion for the same reasons that Mr. Wright outlined. I think we need to give it some more time, get some more information that is doable.
Thank you. Councilmember Wilder.
I just want to get another clarifying point. Will we have better predictions like in October, where we could come back and revisit this? And that was you kind of mentioned that a little bit earlier. I think I guess maybe I might have read it wrong, but where by October we could get a better picture of things, where we could see some of the funds and kind of make a better assessment of things. My only challenge is I just trying to figure out where the numbers are coming from. You know, I support schools more than anything else. I support the work you're doing, but I'm trying to figure out where the numbers are coming from, where we could get some other funds from. I'm just thinking my thought is to go ahead and pass this amount now, and then come back in October and revisit this once we have more pictures. I just don't know within 2 weeks how it's going to make a big difference. That's that's my only concern. Whereas it moves every day. For licensing for us, it moves every single day. I'm just thinking I would rather go ahead and approve this amount and then make it a priority, go with Mr. Nelson, Councilman Nelson has said, and then make it a priority in October to look at this in October to see what other funds are adjusted, because the budget can always be adjusted, is that correct? So maybe make an adjustment in October once we have a better time period. And I'm not saying I'm not want to fund it, but again, in October, at least we can have a better assessment of where things really are, and then we can see kind of where we're going as a state, as a nation. The president said we're coming back strong. We're going to be stronger than ever and better than ever. So I'm holding to that. So I'd rather kind of come back in October and just pass the budget currently, and then with this amount, and then just come back in October and just kind of see, where all these projections are, and see. We'll have more time to look at our information as well, and see where we see that this has happened, and then maybe we can shift some of these funds now to the school system, knowing they got this to deal with, and let's make this a priority of our funding stream for the October session once we kind of have a better look at some of the numbers. That to me, it's kind of like a compromise where we're looking at the fund balance, and then we're looking at the number one priority when we get better numbers in October of seeing where we're going. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Wright.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just respectfully push back on that, Councilmember Wilder, because I think that this, first off, the school board struggled to get a meeting. They postponed a meeting to discuss it last Thursday. They had a marathon session, and they left with a lot of questions. And I think that this would give them more time to really sort of formulate a plan, because if it is true that we're going to be cutting $2.2 million out of the budget, they need time to sort of figure out what that would mean for them. I don't think that, perhaps, Dr. Edwards, maybe you know exactly what that would mean, and you can say, this is what the impact would be, but it seems to me that we don't have clear answers yet, and I don't know why we would push ourselves to make a decision when we can't be assured that students won't suffer as a result.
I can tell you a $2.2 million cut out of our budget, along with any potential sales tax and lottery, is going to be huge. The bulk of our budget, over 80%, is personnel and people. So to make up the difference, it's not crayons, it's not pencils, it's not school lunches, it's people. And when you look at, if you just did an average of $60,000, which might be salary and benefits, and that's an average because we have, all ranges if you look at our pay schedules. Even a $1.2 million cut, which is where our option B was, that equates to about 20 staff members right there, just to make those kinds of cuts. That is not a place that I want to be at a time when our children are most vulnerable. I struggle with that. I don't know what their needs are in the future, but I do know that they have needs. So in order to do that, yes, we're going to have to try our best. Now, our first option is what we talked about just now: retirements, resignations. If we don't have to replace someone, that's great. But not replacing someone may save someone's job, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's a better system for children. It also doesn't mean that we're always going to save revenue, because we have revenue. For example, we get about, I think it's 1.6 for class size reduction, to keep class sizes smaller. Well, if I make class sizes larger by not replacing some staff members, then I forfeit that revenue too. So that's part of that moving target. But it's really looking at people, not necessarily programs or stuff, when you start making some significant cuts.
Thank you, Councilmember Pero.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Wright, I think I heard you say reckless, but I'm going to assume that you said realistic. Otherwise, I'd take offense at your comments. I think they were inappropriate.
No, Councilmember, I did say reckless, and you can take offense.
Well,
I just want to clarify. I did say reckless. I want to make sure the record is clear on that point. I did say reckless.
Well, obviously, you've got a lot to learn about budgeting. All right, so as we go through this, if you'll notice, if we do not take the $3.39 million and that I proposed, we could add to it a total of $193,000 to that number, and every penny above that puts a hole in our budget. So if you want to balance a budget or you're going to find cuts, if you're talking about funding them fully in a full $2.2 million, you better start listing out where you're going to cut the money, because it's got to be there. We can't just make money. We're not the feds. I know your previous administration, you could print money. We can't do that here. We've got to have a balanced budget. All right?
Yeah, thank you. And I would like to say something right now. We do need to have a balanced budget, and we are going to get there. But in the time of an unprecedented time of a pandemic, we have time. And I don't know why people are trying to rush it now, tonight. And I understand that we are all very sensitive, and whatever, you know, we get upset, and there are times that we really want to share what we really want to share. I will not be supporting this tonight. I do like the idea of giving it time to see what comes in, to see where they have a better picture at. I don't understand what the rush is. We don't have to have a budget balanced until June 30th. And we are sitting at May 12th. So I don't think to just rush through it. Everyone knows that there will be some type of cut. But I don't think we have to decide that exactly tonight. So that's my opinion. And thank you. And as we get very tense, everyone at different times, I am not for rushing through it to just get it done tonight. So I just want to say that right now. And I may have a little bit more to say, but Councilmember Wilder just had his hand up, followed by Councilmember Hagelson.
Just so I'm understanding as well. Just want to be clear. So when do we need to have? I understand. What do you think? If we give you, if it's additional 2 weeks, what more information do you think you'll be able to bring to the table, or what information do you think you have?
We'll have a better understanding of what the sales tax impact for the current year has been. And again, we won't have exact figures of what it will be for next year, but we'll have a better predictor as to the impact of that, and the lottery funds, hopefully, by then.
And you have the lottery funds?
Yeah. The other thing that I would just ask, and I know we received our CARES application yesterday, and I heard the city manager say that today they received their $7.29 million fund. 7.2, sorry. $7.2 million funds, and she was unsure as to what it could be used for. And I'm assuming that the city is going to use the 7.2 to help the city departments, and we're part of the city. So not knowing if any of that could be of benefit to the schools, that also gives us time to find out what those funds could be used for.
And just so clear, as far as on the city side, when do we need to have a budget passed as far as comfortable nature for the city staff, that it wouldn't put you on a bind, or when is it?
So state code requires that we have a balanced budget July 1st, so June 30th. We need to have a balanced budget going into the new fiscal year. So you are scheduled to meet again on May 26th for a work session, hopefully to bring some closure to the budget, so staff could then write the budget resolution for you to do a first reading of the budget on June 9th and a second reading on June 23rd. If you do not get to a balanced budget on May 26th, then I would suggest you pencil in as a placeholder right now a work session for June 2nd.
So, but if we wait until May the 26th, it wouldn't put the city staff in a bind, or
It would not. I would also add that by May 26th, we will have some the first receipt of consumer-driven revenues that come in May 20th, and we promised to council that we would bring you an update every month on what's going on with our revenues.
Okay, great. All right, thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you. And Councilmember Hegelson.
So, with this number, this $39,828,000, Mr. Wright, this is the number that is presented in the city manager's revised budget. So I don't think it's a number that is just simply, pulled out of the air. So that number has some substance, and it has some substance based on the fact of a declining enrollment. It has some substance knowing that, as Ms. Lukanich, I think, said a minute ago, that the state, you're assuming another $2.5 million from the state.
They proposed that.
Yes. Yep, exactly. Not guaranteed, obviously. We realize that. The city came up with a $6.5 million cut in their budget after some of this has happened. I think the sooner that the school division and the school board has numbers to begin working with, and that means, hey, city council is going to only tax our taxpayers so much. The $39 million is actually $1.5 million more than just 2 years ago, the 2019 budget. So it's not like it's crazy, out of the world, reckless, or any of these other words that we want to associate. It's $1.5 million more than the local operations in 2019. It's what the city manager proposed. In addition, there is a local reduction, but there is more in the state money, $2.5 million more, as you just stated. Plus, there's also this possibility of the stimulus money that you now put in here of another 2.5. So I think that the sooner we get to the at least some of the items, I think the better. We need to start making decisions. I realize nothing looks good, but that's part of it. I mean, when you're dealing with a budget, you got difficult decisions, and I kind of wished other folks would come up and say, hey, here's what we can lower, because the reality is we really also needing to be looking at our taxpayers. I mean, they're, in all respect, government folks are the ones that haven't missed a paycheck. A lot of the citizens that we're taxing have, and we have to be empathetic. And the last thing we can do is say, hey, we need another $1 million from you guys. I really wish we had the ability to say we're all working together, all three of us, saying, hey, we're going to sacrifice because this is austerity. This is time that we have got to really lower the burden on our citizens. I've heard from lots of businesses that have shuttered. Nobody's getting paychecks, and so when we talk about anything other than that, it's not good. We got to look at it in the world that we live in. I hope we can approve this. I think Councilmember Nelson had put together a fairly decent package to talk about the extra fund balance that is never utilized for operations, but in a fashion that can be used for operations next year because of that this trouble that we're in. I think that what it does is gives the school administration and staff time to say, we got to tighten up big time. We got to look at some of these numbers that you gave us with regarding, those standards of quality positions and say, here's the administration that we can cut. And so I think that strengthens your hand. Although you don't want to do it, I totally get it. But we can't make money out of we don't have a printing press that works anymore. So I'll support this, and I hope we'll all support it so we can move on. And obviously at any time in the process we can always amend it before, but at least we're moving the ball down the field.
And thank you, Councilmember Nelson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was the first one tonight to suggest that we delay for all the reasons we mentioned about an hour and 20 minutes ago. I'm not sure at this point how much a delay of 2 weeks or 4 weeks is going to do. However better the school division stands in a month, because things in the economy are much more positive, is just going to contribute to an enhancement of your fund balance. And by my proposal, all of that is going to the school division. So you're not going to lose it, you're going to have it, and it won't be in this budget, but you will have it available to you to balance the budget next year. Whether that fund balance is $3 million or $1,500, or $1.5 million, it's going to be available to the school division to balance its budget. And the city is not going, most likely, to have any more money. We have cut our expenses, and our revenues are not as fluctuating as is the school division. We don't have the volatility in that you do. So I don't think our resources and wherewithal is going to increase, but certainly yours could, and it could not. So I'm going to support this motion simply because things are not going to change in 2 weeks or 4 weeks, as long as whatever positive outcomes occur are going to be available to you by virtue of that fund balance reserve.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Councilmember Pero.
Just want to point out again, that this is, this can be changed in the upcoming year. This is a milestone. This gives something that the schools can work to. They could come back in the next fiscal year in the first quarter and say, hey, we've looked through this, we've modified our operational expenses, which are not going to be modified, I don't think, before we have to approve this budget. And this is what the funding gap is, or we're okay, and council can make some decisions then. And this is perfectly reasonable, gets us to a balanced, towards the balanced budget, and we can move on, because I do think we're putting in staff in a bind. If we get into a point, and if we get to a point where we're pushing the statutory limits on notifications, we could have some really late nights and make some rush decisions. We're also, by pushing this decision off another 2 weeks, look at the school board members that are spending their time with us here reviewing this. Look at the school staff. I know that they all have better things that they could be doing, like trying to figure out what the numbers are going to be next year. So we need to be respectful of their time as well. Thank you.
Any further thoughts or discussions on the motion that's on the floor? And that is to vote for the $39,828,498 be removed from the budget, or from the list, I'm sorry.
From the list.
Be removed from the list. I do have a couple of thoughts before I'm getting ready to call for the vote. One, I would like to learn more about the $7.2 million and what it can and can't be used for. We will have that. Also, I have asked the city manager, just because this involves some positions, I've asked for the discussion and on some functional cuts from services that we do in the city. And so I would like to have that dollar amount brought back to us on what it means to have certain functions of services in the city that we have. I mean, we're talking right now, this is part of my discussion, because, you know, once you cut, we tend not to ever get things back. And so I want to see, are there other places in our budget that we can gain some funds? And when I say functions, things that we are doing now in COVID that we were not doing prior to, meaning taking all online payments, having the option of people to drop off payments, things that are people-driven. They are persons tied to the functions. I want departments to look at that. I want departments, because, again, we're post-COVID now, and we have talked and discussed these things, but what we are always pitting is departments against each other, functions, operations against each other. But we never really ask the citizens, what were you willing to do without? We don't ask for hard cuts. We just want to pit everybody against each other. So I'm asking that dollar amounts be tied to positions for functions that we no longer need in the era that we are in 2020. Whether it be changing citizen behaviors and/or the hard facts of changing citizen standards and expectations on the city end. Now, if I need to be more clarifying?
Yes.
Okay. So people walk up and pay their water bills at our windows. Most people don't have to do that. They can get a money order, they can put it in the mail. We do not need to take direct payments. Right now in COVID, City Hall is closed down. But that's a functional operations behavior tied to positions. And so if there are more positions like that, it may change the delivery of services, it may change customer service. But in this time, I think we need to put a little more thought to our functional delivery of services. And I'm telling you, it may change some citizen behaviors and expectations. But no one wants to bring the hard things up. All of this is hard, but I think we can go deeper in some areas. So as schools don't get all of the hit, or this department gets all of the hit. So that's what I'm bringing this up now for, but I would like the 7.2 million. I would like to know the cost of positions tied to functions that can be changed for the future of the city. Some citizens, you know, like I said, changing citizen expectation and behavior, and I believe there are other areas that we could do that as well. Maybe not necessarily tied to City Hall, it may be operations in another way, but there are things that I have thought about that others haven't. We ask kids to take a hit in the centers. We ask kids to take a hit at schools. We ask families that take a hit because you're going to need employment and work services. When we talk about centers, I'm going to go ahead and throw this out there. Because when we talk about centers, we only talk about the urban core centers. Well, you know, I've thought about it, and I said, wow, we may need to discuss senior centers and where other cuts can come from. I'm just putting it all out on the table. I'm putting it all out on the table, and while I'm putting it all out on the table, we have a motion on the floor. I tell you what, I'm going to save that next comment. I'm going to save my next comments. So, the motion on the floor, and I will tell you, I will call for the vote, and I will put out there the option that I may change my thought about this from what I said earlier, and I'll tell everyone why after the vote. Councilmember Nelson.
Very quickly, I do want to make it clear that my intent in voting for this is that the fund balance, when it's established and available next fiscal year, will be used to bring the funding for the Lynchburg City Schools up to the level of their request in option B.
Thank you.
2.2.
Thank you.
Million.
And I will call for the vote. Thank you. Councilmember Wright?
No. Sorry. Do you need to make a disclosure? Since we're voting on the schools,
I think it's a moot point. My wife is not going to be employed next year.
No problem. Just knowing in all our discussion, it's kind of sometimes gets lost, so.
Thank you for that.
Yes, sir.
And thank you, Councilmember Nelson, because I would agree with your intent, and so that's a part of my rationale in a minute. I'm calling for the vote right now. Are there any questions or clarifications? Councilmember Wright?
No.
Councilmember Wilder?
No.
Councilmember Nelson?
Yes.
Councilmember Pero?
Yes.
Councilmember Hegelson?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Dolan?
No.
No. Thank you. So the motion does not pass. And so we will, if you would bring back the information in some form. If I need to get further clarification, I will do that. Also, Councilmember Wilder.
This question not about schools, but for the next motion, do we have one more item left? Is that the fire department? Was the last item?
We do, but we're about to not have that because it's 7:20 and we're about to go into our regular meeting.
Can I make a quick motion?
Yes, Councilmember
Can I make a motion?
Wilder?
We allocate that last 193 to the fire department and then revisit it in October once we have better projection numbers. Is that possible? Okay, can I make that motion?
93,000 or 100,000?
The 190, the remaining
department.
amount, is that what it is? 193,936?
Yes.
Can we allocate that portion to additional firemen, firepersons? I know they need more, but since it's such a moving target, can we allocate that portion, that's the balance, and then revisit that in October for additional portion?
Where are you?
He is looking at the amount of balance after our current decisions.
So this would mean
We have all those 19 decisions. I mean, number 19 was all the decisions, whether we do it, you know, the full staff beginning now or later.
I just thought it would give us a portion, so we could have, it would give us a start, and then we
like
could
that
revisit
idea.
in October. That was my thought.
I like
So
that.
what I believe Councilmember Wilder is suggesting is that we take the $193,936, basically put it in a reserve allocation to go towards funding
Additional
either
fire
6
persons.
or 9 firefighters.
Yes, and then revisit it in October. That was a motion that I'd like to make.
I'll second it.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. The motion has been made and second. And further discussion, Councilmember Wilder.
No, ma'am, we've discussed that.
Thank you, Councilmember Wright.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think it's a really good thought from Councilmember Wilder, and I think it's really important that we, this is obviously an incredible need for our community. We have been short a medic unit for quite some time, and the growth in our community has been tremendous. And so I, for one, am excited to see us put some of that fund balance towards, in a concrete way, towards funding the 9 full-time firefighters that the fire department so desperately needs.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Councilmember Nelson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll just say that I think it's a good idea to get the funding stream going, but that is a paltry amount given what we need to do.
Thank you. Councilmember Helgeson?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and absolutely. I mean, that's why I brought up all these other items. And when I bring them up, sometimes people castigate me personally, which doesn't help anything. I'm looking at tough decisions. You know, if we can free up money, that would give more that can go to where it's desperately needed. You mentioned about looking at things differently and collecting. You know, you think about all these new Zoom meetings that happen now. And so just looking back at one of the items, 43,000 of training that could be done in a Zoom meeting rather than traveling across the country. That 43,000 could have gone to the extra 193,000. Plus we could have done a few other things. So it's a paltry amount. We need to have the 9 to have the unit rather than 6 and have increased burnout like we're talking about. At least we're heading in the right direction.
Thank you, Councilmember Carroll. I'm sorry, I thought I saw.
You're right, it doesn't provide a new unit, but it does provide that, I can't say that word, the refreshment, the replacement rate, or the overflow, whatever it is. Relief factor, thank you. It's another R word. The relief factor does help bolster the relief factor, but it does not provide another unit. This would be helpful, and I will support it.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Vice Mayor Dolan?
I would support it also, just from the fact that it is a start, and we're going to relook at it in October. Things could be a whole lot different then. Absolutely.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Councilmember has motion and second that the $193,936 be put toward the need for the medic unit and then be revisited in October after revenues have come in and for the additional funding for the full 9, but it will give the relief to the 6. And is that, I'm making sure I'm correct. All right, thank you. All right, if there's no further discussion, I will be calling for the vote. And Councilmember Wright?
Aye.
Councilmember Wilder?
Aye.
Councilmember Nelson?
Aye.
Councilmember Pero?
Aye.
Councilmember Helgeson?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dolan?
Aye.
And I do have an aye also, and the motion passes. Thank you very much. We will go into 7:30 meeting. I'm sorry?
Madam Mayor,
Oh.
I have something that I thought I'd just bring up now, if it's all right. I'd like
No,
to.
yeah, go ahead. I want us to do roll call,
Okay,
so
let's
we
do
may
roll
go
call
a
then.
little
I thought
bit
you were skipping
later.
that. Oh,
No,
sorry.
because I do want to know, how long does the COVID update take? Because that's an important announcement that I wanted to get out to the public as well.
2 minutes. He can do it at 7:30.
He can do it at 7:30 because there was something really, really great for our small businesses that I wanted to make sure we got up there. So I will start with roll call, and if I could just start with Councilmember Wright.
No items, Madam Mayor.
All right, Councilmember Wilder.
If I had it, I would have forgot, so I'm
Okay.
good.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Nelson.
No items.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Pero.
I'm sorry for this. I'd like to make a motion to reconsider the minutes of March 10th, 2020. The reason for that is I found a couple of Scribner's errors that I think would need to be cleaned up for the record. And I'd like to have the motion to reconsider. If you will approve that, then we can work with Robin to make sure. But those are approved minutes, and I think we need to reconsider that matter.
Okay, they are approved minutes. And the date again?
March 10th.
March 10th, okay. All right, that's fine. The motion's been approved and second. Is there any further discussion on that?
Aye.
All right, thank you very much, and I'll call for the vote. I'm sorry, go ahead. Councilmember Wright? Aye. Councilmember Wilder? Aye. Councilmember Nelson? Aye. Councilmember Pero?
Aye.
Councilmember Helgeson? Vice Mayor Dolan? Aye. And I will do an aye as well.
And I just want to make one brief point on that second vote. Thank you, Madam Mayor. We're pretty much locked into the $39.8 million for schools now unless we find additional money sources such as you brought up. The budget is balanced except for that. If we had lined that off, that we would have been balanced. So we've got to identify new revenues. So I imagine in between this meeting and the next meeting, I think council should go and look for where those savings are going to come from. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Roll call items, no items. Vice Mayor Helgeson, Vice Mayor Dolan, any roll call items? All right, thank you. I have two. The local election has been moved, as everyone knows, from May 5th to May 19th. The deadline to request an absentee ballot was today by 5 p.m. The deadline to return it is by Saturday, May 16th by 5 p.m. You may also vote absentee in person Wednesday through Saturday of this week and Monday, May 18th from 9 a.m. to...
Absentee ballots closed today.
Right. The request.
Which means you can't vote in person either.
I think you can up through Saturday.
Yeah.
Right.
Up to Saturday? But
right.
Okay, I had to request an absentee ballot.
Up till 5 o'clock Saturday,
okay.
May 16th.
All right.
Right.
So your difference is good.
Right, and the deadline to return it is by Saturday, May 16th by 5 p.m. You may also vote absentee in person Wednesday through Saturday of this week and Monday, May 18th from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. at the registrar's office at 825 Kemper Street. Thanks to everyone also for the compliance with the COVID-19 staying at home, social distancing, and wearing masks in public directives to continue to stop the spread, and we cannot become complacent in that. So thank you very much, and if you could give us a 5-minute or so recess, we will start very soon. Thank you very much. Thank you.